Edda by Snorri Sturluson, translated and edited by Anthony Faulks. Note on the author and editor. Snorri Turluson, historian, poet, and politician, was born at Hvamm in western Iceland in 1179. He belonged to an aristocratic family, the Sturlungar, who gave their name to the period of violence and turmoil in the early 13th century, which led to the loss of Icelandic independence to the King of Norway in 1262 through 64. Snorri acquired great wealth and power and was twice law speaker at the Icelandic parliament, Alþingi, and twice visited Norway, where he became embroiled in the politics of King Hakon Hakonarson and the king's father-in-law, Earl Skulli. The latter rebelled against the king and was killed in 1240, and Snorri also became subject to the king's displeasure, and in 1241 was killed in his own cellar at Skalholt. As he is depicted in contemporary records, Snorri was not an attractive character, but he is acknowledged to be one of Iceland's greatest writers, and appears in his books as urbane, intelligent, and sensitive. His Herskrimgla is the best account of medieval Scandinavian history, and his Edda is a masterpiece of organization, wit, and irony. He may also be the author of one of the finest of the sagas of Islanders, Egil's Saga. He was a man of great learning, and in spite of belonging to a society that had been fully Christian for 2 centuries, was deeply immersed in the traditions of his pagan Viking ancestors. Anthony Faulks is professor of Old Icelandic at the University of Birmingham. He studied Old Icelandic and medieval English at Balliol College, Oxford, and was lecturer for 10 years at Birkbeck College, University of London. He has traveled widely in Iceland and took his doctorate at the University in Reykjavik in 1981. He has carried out extensive research on Icelandic texts, including various versions of Snorri Sturluson's Edda. He was president of the Viking Society for Northern Research from 1986 through 88, and is now joint editor of the Society's Saga Book and Text Series. In 1992, he was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Icelandic Order of the Falcon for services to Icelandic scholarship. As I bring you this Norse creation story, this pre-introduction are comments from Rasmus B. Andersen, LLD, former professor of the Scandinavian languages in the University of Wisconsin and ex-U.S. minister to Denmark. He believed that Snorri is the author of Gylfaginning, a part of the Younger Edda said to date back to the year 1220, though the material out of which the mythological system is constructed is said to be much older, such as in the ancient Vala's prophecy of the Elder Edda, a poem that holds the ace of faith and is said to be much older than the introduction of Christianity of Iceland. Andersen added that it is not improbable that the religious system of the Odinic religion had assumed a permanent form in the memories of the people long before the time of Snorri, who preserved those stories in written form without verbal change. Had it not been for these Eddas, the gods and goddesses and heroes would have been consigned to oblivion, and all knowledge of the Odinic religion would have been obliterated. It was in the year 860 that Iceland was discovered. In 874, the Teutonic spirit, being the Germanic tribes, fled there for refuge from tyranny. A government based on the principles of old Teutonic liberty was established, and from there went forth daring Vikings, who discovered Greenland and Vinland, and their skalds were also in the courts of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, England, and Germany, singing their praises. The zeal of priests in propagating Christianity to Iceland was so great that they sought to root out every trace of the Asa faith, the Old Norse language, and they left but unintelligible fragments of the heathen religious structure. Yet the Eddas give us a clue to a past that refuses to be forgotten, and rises to the call of ancestral spirit. Welcome, I am Daisy, your hostess. In this video, I will bring a story of creation and destruction of the world of the Norse gods, titled Gylfaginning, which is a section of the Edda by Snorri Turluson. He tells the story of King Gylfe of Sweden, who disguises himself as Gangleri to visit Asgard, a realm of the Norse gods. While there, he meets with three mysterious figures who provide him with answers to his questions. The Edda by Snorri Turluson was written in Old Norse, which is a North Germanic language spoken in medieval Scandinavia. The version I'm reading is translated by Anthony Faulks. Like I mentioned in one of my earlier videos, I am bringing a few creation stories to share with you. So far, here I have for you the Hopi story, the Secret Book of John, the Epic of Gilgamesh, Hesiod's Theogony, and others, so make sure to look for them in my book playlist. This exploration into the many different creation stories offers us an opportunity to ponder on the human experience and our journey here on Earth. When we look back at history, it is not unusual to find that for the most part, man has been searching not so much for the meaning of life, but more so where he came from. As interesting as it sounds, I'm of the opinion that the more far back we go, we keep digging deeper and seem to find no end. It is no wonder there are so many stories of creation. Who is right? As we travel back in time, quickly and easily, one can fall into conspiracy theories, mud flood stories, and more. Perhaps everyone is right. Maybe the world has reset so many times that each creation story has its place in time. The Gylfaginning was written in 1220, years after the Old Testament. By that time, Christianity had spread up all the way to Norway. The prologue starts with the Christian Adam and Eve story of how they populated the earth. But humanity fell out of grace and was wiped out with a flood, and Noah, who along with 8 people survived, repopulated the earth again. It is mentioned that the earth is divided in 3 sections: Africa, Asia, Europe, or Enea. Somehow, the center stage for all this is Turkey. And that's where they start with their main characters. So it is there where 12 kingdoms are established, with 12 rulers which are superior to everyone else, and 12 languages. From this area, in my opinion, right about here is where Greek meets Norse. We are told that Troan, the daughter of King Priam, married Munon, and they had a son, Thor, who married Sibyl. Well, as many of you know, Priam was the legendary and last king of Troy during the Trojan War of Greek mythology. He's also a character in Homer's The Iliad. Also, in the Gylfaginning, they mention the giants, who are also mentioned in Greek mythology and the Bible. So to me, it appears that the people of Noah populated and established in Turkey, and then somehow went off and spread to Saxony, which is a state in eastern Germany, also France, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. The Gylfaginning creation story adds that God made heaven and earth along with everything else, plus a place for the wicked known as hell, down in the 9th world. Well, let me not get ahead of myself. Let's meet up with King Gylfe. He can tell it best. Edda. Prologue. Almighty God created heaven and earth, and all things in them. And lastly, 2 humans from whom generations are descended, Adam and Eve. And their stock multiplied and spread over all the world. But as time passed, mankind became diverse. Some were good and orthodox in faith, but many more turned aside to follow the lusts of the world and neglected God's commandments. And so God drowned the world in a flood, together with all creatures in the world except those who were in the ark with Noah. After Noah's flood, there lived 8 people who inhabited the world, and from them generations have descended. And it happened just as before, that as the world came to be peopled and settled, it turned out to be the vast majority of mankind that cultivated desire for wealth and glory and neglected obedience to God. And this reached such a pass that they refused to mention the name of God. But who was there then to tell their children of the mysteries of God? So it happened that they forgot the name of God, and in most parts of the world there was no one to be found who knew anything about his Creator. But even so, God granted them earthly blessings, wealth, and prosperity for them to enjoy in the world. He also gave them a portion of wisdom, so that they could understand all earthly things and the details of everything they could see in the sky and on earth. They pondered and were amazed at what it could mean that the earth and animals and birds had common characteristics in some things, though there was a difference of quality. One of the earth's characteristics was that when it was dug into on high mountain tops, water sprang out there, and there was no need to dig further for water than in deep valleys. It is the same with animals and birds, that it is just as far to blood in the head as in the feet. It is a second property of the earth that every year there grows on the earth vegetation and flowers, and the same year it all falls and fades. It is the same with animals and birds, that their hair and feather grows and fall off every year. It is the third property of the earth that when it is opened and dug, then vegetation grows on the soil which is uppermost on the earth. Rocks and stones they thought of as equivalent to teeth and bones of living creatures. From this they reasoned that the earth was alive and had life after a certain fashion, and they realized that it was enormously old in count of years and mighty in nature. It fed all creatures and took possession of everything that died. For this reason, they gave it a name and traced their ancestry to it. Similarly, they learned from their elderly relatives that after many hundreds of years had been reckoned, there was the same earth, sun, and heavenly bodies. But the courses of the heavenly bodies were various. Some had a longer course and some a shorter. From such things, they thought it likely that there must be some controller of the heavenly bodies, who must be regulating their courses in accordance with his will, and he must be very powerful and mighty. And they assumed, if he ruled over the elements, that he must have existed before the heavenly bodies. And they realized that if he ruled the course of the heavenly bodies, he must rule the shining of the sun, and the dew of the sky, and the produce of the earth, which is dependent on it, and similarly the wind of the sky, and with it the storm of the sea. But they did not know where his kingdom was, and so they believed that he ruled all things on earth and in the sky of heaven and heavenly bodies, of the sea and the weathers. But so as to be better able to give an account of this and fix it in memory, they then gave a name among themselves to everything. And this religion has changed in many ways as nations became distinct and languages branched. But they understood everything with earthly understanding, for they were not granted spiritual wisdom. Thus they reasoned that everything was created out of some material. The world was divided into 3 regions, from south to west, and in up to the Mediterranean Sea. This part was called Africa. The southern part of this section is hot and burned up by the sun. The second part from west and to the north and in up to the sea, this is called Europe and Enea. The northern part there is cold, so that vegetation does not grow and habitation is impossible. From the north and over the eastern regions, right to the south, that is called Asia. In that part of the world is all beauty and splendor and wealth of earthly produce, gold and jewels. The middle of the world is there too, and just as the earth there is more beautiful and better in all respects than in other places, so too mankind there was most honored with all blessings, wisdom and strength, beauty and every kind of skill. Near the middle of the world was constructed that building and dwelling which has been the most splendid ever, which was called Troy. We call the land there Turkey. This place was built much larger than others and with greater skill in many respects, using the wealth and resources available there. 12 kingdoms were there, and one high king, and many countries were subject to each kingdom. In the city there were 12 chief languages. The 12 rulers of the kingdom were superior to other people who have lived in the world in all human qualities. The name of one king there was Munan or Menon. He was married to the daughter of the high king Priam. She was called Troan. They had a son. He was called Tror. We call him Thor. He was brought up in Thrace by a duke whose name was Loricus. When he was 10, he inherited his father's weapons. He was as beautiful to look at when he came among other people as when ivory is inlaid in oak. His hair is more beautiful than gold. When he was 12, he had reached his full strength. Then he lifted from the ground 10 bearskins all at once, and then he killed his foster father Loricus and his wife Laura or Glora, and took possession of the realm of Thrace. We call this Thirdheim. Then he traveled through many countries and explored all quarters of the world and defeated unaided all berserks and giants and one of the greatest dragons and many wild animals. In the northern part of the world he came across a prophetess called Sibyl, whom we call Sif, and married her. No one is able to tell Sif's ancestry. She was the most beautiful of all women. Her hair was like gold. Their son was Loridi, who took after his father. His son was Einridi, his son Viganthor, his son Viganir, his son Moda, his son Magi, his son Sisef, his son Bedvig, his son Athra, whom we call Anar, his son Itmarn, his son Haramad, his son Skeldon, whom we call Skjold, his son Beof, whom we call Biar, his son Eat, his son Gudolf, his son Finn, his son Frellof, we call Fridlif. He had a son whose name was Woden. It is him that we call Odin. He was an outstanding person for wisdom and all kinds of accomplishments. His wife was called Frigida, whom we call Frigg. Odin had the gift of prophecy, and so did his wife. And from this science he discovered that his name would be remembered in the northern part of the world and honored above all kings. For this reason, he became eager to set off from Turkey and took with him a very great following, young people and old, men and women, and they took with them many precious things. And whatever countries they passed through, great glory was spoken of them, so that they seemed more like gods than men. And they did not halt their journey until they came north to the country that is now called Saxony. Odin stayed there a long while and gained possession of large parts of that land. There Odin put in charge of the country 3 of his sons. One's name was Vegdeg. He was a powerful king and ruled over East Saxony. His son was Viturgils. His sons were Vida, father of Hengist, and Zigar, father of Vegdeg, whom we call Svipdag. Odin's second son was called Beldag, whom we call Baldur. He had the country that is now called Westphalia. His son was Brand. His son Friodegar, whom we call Frodi. His son was Friovin. His son Wig. His son Gewis, whom we call Gever. Odin's third son was Sigi. His son Rarer. This dynasty ruled over what is now called France, and from it is descended the family called Volsungs. From all these people great family lines are descended. Then Odin set off north and came to a country that they called Regeneration, and gained possession of all he wished in that land. He set over the area a son of his called Skjold. His son was called Fridlif. From them is descended the family called Skjoldungs. They are kings of Denmark, and what was then called Regeneration is now called Jutland. After that, Odin went north to what is now called Sweden. There was there a king whose name was Gylfe, and when he learned of the arrival of the men of Asia, who were called Aesir, he went to meet them and offered Odin as much power in his realm as he wished himself. And such was the success that attended their travels that in whatever country they stopped, there was then prosperity and good peace there, and everyone believed that they were responsible for it because the people who had power saw that they were unlike other people they had seen in beauty and wisdom. Odin found the conditions in the country attractive and selected as a site for his city the place which is now called Skirnir. He also organized rulers there on the same pattern as had been in Troy, set up 12 chiefs in the place to administer the laws of the land, and he established all the legal system as it had previously been in Troy, and to which the Turks were accustomed. After that he proceeded north to where he was faced by the sea, the one which they thought encircled all lands, and set a son of his over the realm which is now called Norway. He is called Seming, and the kings of Norway trace their ancestry back to him, as do earls and other rulers, as it says in Helgetal. And Odin took with him a son of his whose name was Yngvi, who became king in Sweden, and from him are descended the family lines known as the Ynglings. These Aesir found themselves marriages within the country there, and some of them for their sons too, and these families became extensive, so that throughout Saxony and from there all over the northern regions it spread so that their language, that of the men of Asia, became the mother tongue over all these lands. And people think they can deduce from the records of the names of their ancestors that those names belong to this language, and that the Aesir brought the language north to this part of the world, to Norway and to Sweden, to Denmark and to Saxony. And in England there are ancient names for regions and places which one can tell come from a different language from this one. End of prologue. Gylfaginning, the tricking of Gylfe. King Gylfe was ruler in what is now called Sweden. Of him it is said that he gave a certain vagrant woman, as a reward for his entertainment, one plough land in his kingdom, as much as 4 oxen could plough up in a day and a night. Now this woman was one of the race of the Aesir. Her name was Gylfaginning. She took 4 oxen from the north, from Giant land, the sons of her and a certain giant, and put them before the plough. But the plough cut so hard and deep that it uprooted the land, and the oxen drew the land out into the sea to the west and halted in a certain sound. There Gylfaginning put the land and gave it a name and called it Zealand. Where the land had been lifted from there remained a lake. This is now called Lake Malar in Sweden, and the inlets in the lake correspond to the headlands in Zealand. Thus says the poet Bragi the Old, quote, Gylfaginning drew from Gylfe glad a deep ring of land, so that from the swift pullers steam rose, Denmark's extension. The oxen wore 8 brow stars as they went hauling their plunder, the wide island of meadows and 4 heads. End of quote. King Gylfe was clever and skilled in magic. He was quite amazed that Aesir people had the ability to make everything go in accordance with their will. He wondered whether this could be as a result of their own nature, or whether the divine powers they worshipped could be responsible. He set out to Asgard and traveled in secret and assumed the form of an old man, and so disguised himself. But the Aesir were the wiser in that they had the gift of prophecy, and they saw his movements before he arrived, and prepared deceptive appearances for him. When he got into the city, he saw there a high hall, so that he could scarcely see over it. Its roof was covered with gilded shields like tiles. Theodulf of Vanir refers thus to Valhal being roofed with shields. Quote, on their backs they let shine. They were bombarded with stones. Svafnir's, Odin's hall shingles, those sensible men. End quote. In the doorway of the hall, Gylfe saw a man juggling with knives, keeping 7 in the air at a time. This man spoke first and asked him his name. He said it was Gangleri, and that he had traveled trackless ways. He requested that he might have a night's lodging there, and asked whose hall it was. The man replied that it belonged to their king. And I can take you to see him, then you can ask him his name yourself. And the man turned ahead of him into the hall. Gylfe followed, and the door immediately shut on his heels. He saw there many apartments and many people, some engaged in games, some were drinking, some were armed and were fighting. He looked around and thought many of the things he saw were incredible. And then he said, every doorway, before you go through, should be peered round, for you cannot know for certain where enemies may be sitting waiting inside. He saw 3 thrones, one above the other, and there were 3 men, one sitting in each. Then he asked what the name of their ruler was. The man who had brought him in replied that the one that sat in the lowest throne was king and was called High. Next to him the one called Just as High, and the one sitting at the top was called Third. Then High asked the newcomer whether he had any further business, though he was welcome to food and drink like everyone else there in the High One's hall. He said that he wished first to find out if there was any learned person in there. High said he would not get out of unscathed unless he was more learned, and, quote, stand out in front while you ask. He who tells shall sit. End quote. Gangleri began his questioning thus. Who is the highest and most ancient of all gods? High said, he is called All-Father in our language, but in old Asgard he had 12 names. One is All-Father, the second Heran or Herian, the third Nikar or Nikar, the fourth Nikas or Nikud, the fifth Fjolnir, the sixth Oski, the seventh Omi, the eighth Beflidi or Bleflindi, the ninth Svidar, the 10th Svidrir, the 11th Vidrir, the 12th Yalg or Ilk. Then Gangleri asked, where is this god? What power has he, and what great works has he performed? High said, he lives throughout all ages and rules all his kingdom and governs all things great and small. Then spoke Just as High, he made heaven and earth and the skies and everything in them. Then spoke Third, but his greatest work is that he made man, and gave him a soul that shall live and never perish, though the body decay to dust or burn to ashes, and all men who are righteous shall live and dwell with him himself in the place called Gimli or Vingolf, but wicked men go to hell, and on to the Nifhel, that is down in the 9th world. Then spoke Gangleri, what was he doing before heaven and earth were made? Then High replied, then he was among the frost giants. Gangleri spoke, what was the beginning, and how did things start, and what was there before? High replied, as it says in Voluspa, quote, It was the beginning of time, when nothing was. Sand was not, nor sea, nor cool waves. Earth did not exist, nor heaven on high. The mighty gap was, but no growth." End quote. Then spoke just as high. "It was many ages before the earth was created that Niflheim was made, and in its midst lies a spring called Vergelmer, and from it flow the rivers called Sval, Gunthra, Fjorm, Fimbulthul, Slitter, and Herod, Silg and Leilg, Vid, Lepter, Gjol is next to Hell Gates." Then spoke third. "But first there was the world in the southern region called Muspel. It is bright and hot. That area is flaming and burning, and it is impassable for those that are foreigners there and are not native to it. There is one called Surt that is stationed there at the frontier to defend the land. He has a flaming sword, and at the end of the world he will go and wage war and defeat all the gods and burn the whole world with fire. Thus it says in Voluspa. Surt travels from the south with the Styx destroyer. Shines from his sword the sun of the gods of the slain. Rock cliffs crash, and troll wives are abroad. Heroes tread the road of hell, and heaven splits." Gangleri spoke. "What were things like before generations came to be and the human race was multiplied?" Then spoke High. "These rivers, which are called Elevagar, when they had got so far from their source that the poisonous flow that accompanied them began to go hard like the clinker that comes from a furnace, it turned to ice. And when this ice came to a halt and stopped flowing, the vapor that was rising from the poison froze on the top in the same direction and turned to rime. And this rime increased layer upon layer right across Ginnungagap." Then spoke just as High. Ginnungagap, the part that faces in a northerly direction, was filled with the weight and heaviness of ice and rime, and there was vapor and a blowing inwards from it. But the southerly part of Ginnungagap cleared up in the face of the sparks and molten particles that came flying out of the world of Muspel. Then third spoke. And just as from Niflheim there arose coldness and all things grim, so what was facing close to Muspel was hot and bright, but Ginnungagap was as mild as a windless sky. And when the rime and the blowing of the warmth met, so that it thawed and dripped, there was a quickening from these flowing drops due to the power of the source of the heat, and it became the form of a man, and he was given the name Ymir. But the frost giants call him Argelmer, and from him are descended the generations of frost giants, as it says in the shorter Voluspa. Quote, "All sibyls are from Vidolf, all wizards from Vilmaid, all sorcerers from Svadorthi, all giants from Ymir come." End quote. And here it is told by the giant Vafthrudnir. Where Argelmer came from, together with the sons of giants, first, that wise giant. When from Elevagar shot poison drops and grew until from them came a giant in whom our ancestries all converge. Thus ever too terrible is all this. Then spoke Angleri. How did generations grow from him? And how did it come about that other people came into being? Or do you believe him to be a god whom you have just spoken of? Then High replied, Not at all do we acknowledge him to be a god. He was evil, and all his descendants. We call them frost giants. And it is said that when he slept, he sweated. Then there grew under his left arm a male and a female, and one of his legs begot a son with the other, and descendants came from them. These are frost giants. The ancient frost giant, him we call Ymir. Then spoke Angleri. Where did Ymir live, and what did he live on? The next thing, when the rime dripped, was that there came into being from it a cow called Alhumla, and 4 rivers of milk flowed from its teats, and it fed Ymir. Then spoke Angleri. What did the cow feed on? Hai said, it licked the rime stones, which were salty, and the first day as it licked stones, there came from the stones in the evening a man's hair. The second day, a man's head. The third day, there was a complete man there. His name was Buri. He was beautiful in appearance, big and powerful. He begot a son called Bor. He married a wife called Besla, daughter of the giant Bolthorn, and they had 3 sons. One was called Odin, the second Vili, the third Vi. And it is my belief that this Odin and his brothers must be the rulers of heaven and earth. It is our opinion that this must be what he is called. This is the name of the one who is the greatest and most glorious that we know, and you would do well to agree to call him that too. Then spoke Angleri. How did they get on together? Which group was the more powerful? Then Hai replied, Bor's sons killed the giant Ymir, and when he fell, so much blood flowed from his wounds that with it they drowned all the race of frost giants, except the one escaped with his household. Giants call him Bergelmir. He went up on his ark with his wife and was preserved there, and from them are descended the families of frost giants, as it says here. Countless winters before the earth was created, then was Bergelmir born. That is the first I remember, when that wise giant was laid on a box. Then Gangleri replied, What did Bor's sons do then, if you believe that they are gods? Hai said, There's not just a little to be told about that. They took Ymir and transported him to the middle of Ginnungagap, and out of him made the earth, out of his blood the sea and the lakes. The earth was made of the flesh and the rocks of the bones. Stone and scree they made out of the teeth and molars and of the bones that had been broken. Then spoke Justice High. Out of the blood that came from his wounds and was flowing unconfined, out of his they made the sea, with which they encompassed and contained the earth. And they placed this sea in a circle round the outside of it, and it will seem an impossibility to most to get across it. Then spoke Third. They also took his skull and made out of it the sky, and set it up over the earth with 4 points, and under each corner they set a dwarf. Their names are Austri, Vestri, Nordri, Sudri. Then they took molten particles and sparks that were flying uncontrolled and had shot out of the world of Muspel, and set them in the middle of the firmament of the sky, both above and below, to illuminate heaven and earth. They fixed all the lights, some in the sky, some moved in a wandering course beneath the sky, but they appointed them positions and ordained their courses. Thus it is said in ancient sources that by means of them days were distinguished, and also the count of years, as it says in Voluspa. The sun did not know where her dwelling was. The moon did not know what power he had. The stars did not know where their places were. Then it was like above the earth before this took place. Then spoke Angleri. This is important information that I have just heard. That is an amazingly large construction and skillfully made. How is the earth arranged? Then Hai replied, It is circular round the edge, and around it lies the deep sea, and along the shore of this sea they gave lands to live in to the races of giants. But on the earth, on the inner side, they made a fortification round the world against the hostility of giants. And for this fortification They used the giant Ymir's eyelashes, and they called the fortification Midgard. They also took his brains and threw them into the sky and made out of them the clouds, as it says here. From Ymir's flesh was earth created, and from blood sea, rock of bones, trees of hair, and from his skull the sky. And from his eyelashes the joyous gods made Midgard for men's sons, and from his brains were those cruel clouds all created. Then spoke Angleri. A great deal it seems to me they had achieved when earth and heaven were made, and sun and stars were put into position, and days were separated. And where did the people come from who inhabit the world? Then Hai replied, as Bor's sons walked along the seashore, they came across 2 logs and created people out of them. The first gave breath and life, the second consciousness and movement, the third a face, speech and hearing and sight. They gave them clothes and names. The man was called Ask, the woman Embla, and from them were produced the mankind to whom the dwelling place under Midgard was given. After that they made themselves a city in the middle of the world, which is known as Asgard. We call it Troy. There the gods and their descendants lived, and there took place, as a result, many events and developments both on earth and aloft. In the city there is a seat called Litzgjalf, and when Odin sat in that throne, he saw over all worlds and every man's activity and understood everything he saw. His wife was called Frigg, Fjögrbin's daughter, and from them is descended the family line that we call the Aesir race, who have resided in old Asgard and the realms that belong to it. And that whole line of descendants is of divine origin. And this is why he can be called All-Father, that he is father of all the gods and of men and of everything that has been brought into being by him and his power. The earth was his daughter and his wife. Out of her he begot the first of his sons, that is Isa Thor. He was possessed of power and strength. As a result, he overcomes all living things. Norfi or Narfi was the name of a giant who lived in Giant Land. He had a daughter called Night. She was black and dark in accordance with her ancestry. She was married to a person called Nalgvari. Their son was called Aud. Next she was married to someone called Anar. Their daughter was called Jord, Earth. Her last husband was Delling. He was of the race of the Aesir. Their son was Day. He was bright and beautiful in accordance with his father's nature. Then Allfather took Night and her son Day and gave them 2 horses and 2 chariots and set them up in the sky so that they have to ride around the earth every 24 hours. Night rides in front of the horse called Hrimfaxi, and every morning he bedews the earth with the drips from his bit. Day's horse is called Skinfaxi, shining mane, and light is shed over all the sky and sea from his mane. Then spoke Angleri. How does he control the course of the sun and moon? Hai said, there was a person whose name was Mundilfari, who had 2 children. They were so fair and beautiful that he called the one Moon and his daughter Sol, Sun, and gave her in marriage to a person called Glen. But the gods got angry at this arrogance and took the brother and sister and set them up in the sky. They made Sol drive the horses that drew the chariot of the sun, which the gods had created, to illuminate the worlds out of the molten particle that had flown out of the world of Muspel. The names of these horses are Arvak and Aswin. Under the shoulders of the horses the gods put 2 bellows to cool them, and in some horses it is called Iron Blast. Moon guides the course of the moon and controls its waxing and waning. He took 2 children from the earth called Bil and Yuki, as they were leaving a well called Berger, carrying between them on their shoulders a tub called Seg. Their carrying pole was called Simul. Their father's name is Vidvin. These children go with Moon, as can be seen from Earth. Then spoke Angleri. The sun moves fast, almost as if she was afraid, and she would not be able to go any faster if she was in terror of her death. Then Hai replied, It is not surprising that she goes at great speed. He comes close who is after her, and she has no escape except to run away. Then spoke Angleri. Who is it that inflicts this unpleasantness on her? Hai said, It is 2 wolves, and the other one that is going after her is called Skull. She's afraid of him, and he will catch her, and the one that is running ahead of her is called Hati Hodravintneson, and he is trying to catch the moon, and that will happen. Then spoke Angleri. What is the origin of the wolves? Hai said, A certain giantess lives east of Midgard in a forest called Ironwood. In that forest live troll wives called Ironvidur. The ancient giantess breeds as sons many giants, and all in wolf shapes. And it is from them that these wolves are descended. And they say that from this clan will come a most mighty one called Moongarm. He will fill himself with the lifeblood of everyone that dies, and he will swallow heavenly bodies and spatter heaven and all the skies with blood. As a result, the sun will lose its shine, and winds will then be violent and will rage to and fro. Thus it says in Voluspa. In the east lives the Old One, in Ironwood, and breeds there Fenrir's kind. One of them all comes one in particular, Sun Snatcher in troll's guise. He gorges the life of doomed men, reddens God's holes with red gore. Dark as sunshine for summers after, all weather hostile. Know you yet, or what? Then spoke Angleri. What way is there to heaven from earth? Then Hai replied, with laughing, That is not an intelligent question. Has no one ever told you that the gods built a bridge to heaven from earth called Bifrost? You must have seen it. Maybe it was what you call the rainbow. It has 3 colors and great strength, and is built with art and skill to a greater extent than other constructions. And strong as it is, yet it will break when Muspel's lads go and ride it, and their horses will have to swim over great rivers. That is how they will advance. Then spoke Angleri. It does not seem to me that the gods built the bridge in good faith, if it is liable to break, considering that they can do as they please. Then spoke Hai. The gods are not deserving of blame for this work. Bifrost is a good bridge, but there is nothing in this world that will be secure when Muspel's sons attack. Then spoke Angleri. What did Allfather do then, when Asgard was built? Hai spoke. In the beginning, he established rulers and bade them decide with him the destinies of men and be in charge of the government of the city. This was in the place called Idavall, in the center of the city. It was their first act to build a temple that their thrones stand in, 12 in addition to the throne that belongs to Allfather. This building is the best that is built on earth, and the biggest. Outside and inside it seems like nothing but gold. This place is called Gladsheim. They built another hall. This was the sanctuary that belonged to the goddesses, and it was very beautiful. And this building is called Vingolf. The next thing they did was lay forges, and for them they made hammer and tongs and anvil, and with these they made all other tools. After that they worked metal and stone and wood, using so copiously the metal known as gold, that they had all their furniture and utensils of gold, and that age is known as the Golden Age, until it was spoiled by the arrival of the woman. They came from Giant Land. Next, the gods took their places on their thrones and instituted their courts, and discuss where the dwarfs had been generated from in the soil and down in the earth like maggots in flesh. The dwarfs had taken shape first and acquired life in the flesh of Ymir, and were then maggots, but by decision of the gods, they became conscious with intelligence and had the shape of men, though they live in the earth and in rocks. Mosognir was a dwarf, and the second was Durin. Thus it says in Voluspa, Then went all the powers to their judgment seats, most holy gods, and deliberated upon this, that a troop of dwarfs should be created from bloody surf and from Blaine's bones. Their man forms many were made, dwarfs in the earth, as Durin said. And the name of these dwarfs, says the prophetess, are these: Ni, Nidi, Nordri, Sudri, Austri, Vestri, Althiof, Balin, Nar, Nain, Nipping, Dane, Bifar, Bafor, Bombor, Nori, Ori, Onar, Oin, Mopitnir, Vig, and Gandalf, Vindalf, Thorin, Fili, Kili, Fundin, Vali, Thror, Throin, Thek, Lit, Vitter, Ner, Nerad, Rek, Radsvin. But these are also dwarves and live in rocks, whereas the previous ones lived in soil. Dropnir, Dolgafari, Hor, Hugstadi, Ledjolf, Glorn, Dori, Ori, Duff, Antvari, Heptafili, Har, Siar. But these came from Svarinshog to Orbangar on Iorumvelir, and from them is descended Lofar. These are their names: Skirper, Verper, Skafen, Ai, Alf, Ingi, Ankenskjaldi, Val, Frosty, Finn, Gunnar. Then spoke Angleri. Where is the chief center or holy place of the gods? I replied, It is at the ash Yggdrasil. There the gods must hold their courts each day. Then spoke Angleri, What is there to tell about that place? Then said, just as high, The ash is of all trees the biggest and best. Its branches spread out over all the world and extend across the sky. 3 of the tree's roots support it and extend very, very far. One is among the Aesir, the second among the frost giants, where Gunngumpgap once was. The third extends over in a flame, and under the root of Velganmir, and Nighog gnaws the bottom of the root. But under the root that reaches towards the frost giants, there is where Mimir's well is, which has wisdom and intelligence contained in it, and the master of the well is called Mimir. He is full of learning because he drinks of the well from the horn Gjallarhorn. Allfather went there and asked for a single drink from the well, but he did not get one until he placed his eye as a pledge. Thus it says in Voluspa, I know it all, Odin, where you deposited your eye, in that renowned well of Mimir. Mimir drinks meat every morning from Valfather's pledge. Know you yet, or what? The third root of the ash extends to heaven, and beneath that root is a well which is very holy, called Weird's Well. There the gods have their court. Every day the Aesir ride there up over Bifrost. It is also called Asbridge. The names of the Aesir horses are as follows. Best is Sleipnir. He is Odin's. He has 8 legs. Second is Glad. Third, Giller. Fourth, Glare. Fifth, Skadebrimmer. Sixth, Silftop. Seventh, Sinner. Eighth, Gills. Ninth, Valhofner. 10th, Gulltop. Lepfedi the 11th. Baldur's horse was burned with him. And Thor walks to the court and wades rivers whose names are Kormt and Ormt, and 2 Kurlogs. These shall Thor wade every day when he is to judge at the Ash Yggdrasil. For Asbridge burns all with flame, the holy waters boil. Then spoke Angleri. Does fire burn over Bifrost? Hai said, the red you see in the rainbow is burning fire. The frost giants and mountain giants would go up into heaven if Bifrost was crossable by everyone that wanted to go. There are many beautiful places in heaven, and everywhere there has divine protection round it. There stands there one beautiful hall under the ash by the well, and out of this hall come 3 maidens whose names are Weird, Verdandi, Skuld. These maidens shape men's lives. We call them Norns. There are also other Norns who visit everyone when they are born to shape their lives, and these are of divine origin, though others are of the race of elves, and a third group are of the race of dwarves, as it says here. Of very diverse parentage, I think the Norns are. They do not have a common ancestry. Some are descended from Aesir, some are descended from elves, some are daughters of Valin. Then spoke Angleri. If Norns determine the fates of men, then allot terribly unfairly, when some have a good and prosperous life, and some have little success or glory, some a long life, some short. I said, good Norns, ones of noble parentage, shape good lives, but as for those people that become the victims of misfortune, it is evil Norns that are responsible. Then spoke Angleri. What other particularly notable things are there to tell about the ash? I said, there is a great deal to tell of it. There is an eagle sits in the branches of the ash, and it has knowledge of many things, and in between its eyes sits a hawk called Verfalner. A squirrel called Ratatosk runs up and down through the ash and carries malicious messages between the eagle and Nidhogg. 4 stags run in the branches of the ash and feed on the foliage. Their names are Dane, Valin, Denair, Durathror. And there are so many snakes in Valgrimr with Nidhogg that no tongue can enumerate them, as it says here. The ash Yggdrasil suffers hardship more than people realize. Stag bites above, and at the sides it rots. Nidhogg eats away at it below. Also it is said, more snakes lie beneath the ash Yggdrasil than any old fool thinks. Goin and Moin, they are Grafvitnir's sons. Grabak and Grafbolid, Ofnir and Svatnir, I think will forever mar the tree twigs. It is also said that the Norns that dwell by Weird's well take water from the well each day, and with it the mud that lies round the well, and pour it up over the ash so that its branches may not rot or decay. And this water is so holy that all things that come into that well go as white as the membrane called the skin that lies round the inside of an eggshell, as it says here. I know an ash. Its name is Yggdrasil, high tree, holy, drenched with white mud. From it come the dews that fall in the valleys. It stands forever green above the Weird's well. The dew that falls from it on the earth, this is what people call honeydew, and from it bees feed. 2 birds feed in Weird's well. They are called swans, and from these birds has come that species of bird that has that name. Then spoke Angleri. You are able to give a great deal of information about the heavens. What other chief centers are there besides the one at Weird's well? I said, many splendid places are there. There's one place that is called Alfheim. There live the folk called light elves, but dark elves live down in the ground, and they are unlike them in appearance, and even more unlike them in nature. Light elves are fairer than the sun to look at, but dark elves are blacker than pitch. One place there is called Breidablik, and no fair place is there. Also there is the one called Glitnir, and its walls and columns and pillars are of red gold, and its roof of silver. There also is a place called Himmelbjorg. It stands at the edge of heaven, at the bridge's end where Bifrost reaches heaven. There also is a great place called Valaskjolf. This place is Odin's. The gods built it and roofed it with pure silver. Skjolf's is the throne of that name. And when Allfather sits on that throne, he can see over all the world. At the southernmost end of heaven is the hall which is fairest of all and brighter than the sun, called Gimli. It shall stand when both heaven and earth have passed away, and in that place shall live good and righteous people forever and ever. Thus it says in Völuspá, I know a hall standing fairer than the sun, better than gold, at Gimli. There shall virtuous men dwell, and for all ages enjoy delight. Then spoke Angleri, what will protect this place when Surt's fire burns heaven and earth? Hai said, they say there's another heaven south of and above this heaven of ours, and that heaven is called Anlang, and that there is a third heaven still further above that one, and that is called Bidvlain, and it is in that heaven that we believe this place to be. But we believe it is only light elves that inhabit these places for the time being. Then spoke Angleri, where does the wind come from? It is so strong, it stirs great seas and whips up fire. But strong as it is, it cannot be seen. Thus it is marvelously made. Then said Hai, I can easily tell you that. At the northernmost end of heaven there sits a giant called Reisvelg. He has eagle form, and when he starts to fly, wind arises from beneath his wings. It says so here. He is called Reisvelg, who sits at heaven's end, giant in eagle form. From his wings they say wind comes over all men. Then spoke Angleri, why is there such a great difference between the warmth of summer and the cold of winter? Hai said, so wise a man should not need to ask, for everyone is able to tell that. But if you have got to be the only one so ill informed that you have never heard it, then I will look on it kindly that you should for once show your ignorance in asking, rather than that you should continue unaware of what you ought to know. Vazud is the name of the one that is father of summer, and he is so blissful in his life that it is from his name that what is pleasant is called Svazlig, delightful. And winter's father is called either Vinloni or Vinsval. He is Vasad's son, and members of this family have been grim and cold-hearted, and winter inherits their nature. Then spoke Angleri, which are the Aesir that men ought to believe in? Hai said, there are 12 Aesir whose nature is divine. Then spoke just as Hai, no less holy are the Aesir, nor is their power less. Then spoke third, Odin is highest and most ancient of the Aesir. He rules all things, and mighty though the other gods are, yet they all submit to him like children to their father. Frey is his wife, and she knows men's fates, though she does not prophesy, as it says here that Odin himself spoke to the ass called Loki. Mad you are, Loki, and out of your wits. Why will you not be silent, Loki? All fates I believe Frigg knows, though she herself does not pronounce. Odin is called All-Father, for he is father of all gods. He is also called Valfather, father of the slain, since all those who fall in battle are his adopted sons. He assigns them places in Valhal and Vingolf, and they are then known as Einherjar. He is also called Hanga god, god of the hanged, and Hapta god, god of prisoners, Pharma god, god of cargoes, and he called himself by various other names on his visit to King Jaerod. I call myself Grim and Ganglari, Harrion Helmberry, Thek, Third, Thun, Un, Helblindi, Hai, San, Zvipal, Sangetal, Hertate, Ninkar, Beilig, Balaig, Bolverk, Fjolnir, Grimmer, Glavsvin, Fjalsvin, Sidhot, Sidskeg, Sigsfather, Nikud, Allfather, Atrid, Farmatir, Oski, Omi, Just as High, Blindi, Gondolier, Harbard, Svedur, Svedrir, Yolk, Kjalar, Vidur, Thror, Ig, Thund, Vakker, Skilfing, Vafud, Hropda Dur, Gaut, Veratir. Then spoke Angleri. What a terrible lot of names you have given him! By my faith, one would need a great deal of learning to be able to give details and explanations of what events have given rise to each of these names. Then said Hai, it is very instructive to go closely into all this, but to put it in a word, most names have been given him as a result of the fact that with all the branches of languages in the world, each nation finds it necessary to adapt his name to their language for invocation and prayers for themselves. But some events giving rise to these names have taken place in his travels and have been made the subject of stories, and you cannot claim to be a wise man if you are unable to tell of these important happenings. Then spoke Angleri. What are the names of the other Aesir, and what do they do, and what glorious works have they done? Hai said, Thor is the most outstanding of them. He is known as Asa Thor, Thor of the Aesir, or Oku Thor, driving Thor. He is strongest of all the gods and men. His realm is a place called Thruvangar, and his hall is called Skirnir. In that hall there are 540 apartments. It is the biggest building that has ever been built. Thus it says in Grimnismal. 500 apartments, and yet 40 more I think are in Skirnir in all. Of all buildings whose roofs I know my son's is the greatest. Thor has 2 goats whose names are Tangniost and Tangrisnir, and a chariot that he drives in, and the goats draw the chariot. From this he is known as Okuthor. He also has 3 special possessions. One of them is the hammer Mjolnir, well known to frost giants and mountain giants when it is raised aloft, and that is not to be wondered at. It has smashed many a skull for their fathers and kinsmen. He has another possession that is very valuable, a girdle of might, and when he buckles it on his strength is doubled. He has a third thing that is a most important possession. This is a pair of iron gloves. He must not be without these when he grips the hammer. But there is no one so wise that can recount all his exploits, though I can tell you so many stories about him that much time will be taken up before all I know is told. Then spoke Gangleri. I would like to hear information about more Aesir. Hai said, Odin's second son is Balder, and there is good to be told of him. He is best and all praise him. He is so fair in appearance and so bright that light shines from him, and there is a plant so white that is called after Balder's eyelash. It is the whitest of all plants, and from this you can tell his beauty both of hair and body. He is the wisest of the Aesir, and most beautifully spoken and most merciful. But it is one of his characteristics that none of his decisions can be fulfilled. He lives in a place called Breidablik. This is in heaven. No unclean thing is permitted to be there, as it says here. It is called Breidablik, where Balder has made himself a dwelling, in that land where I know to be fewest evil intents. The third as is the one called Njord. He lives in heaven in a place called Notun. He rules over the motion of wind and moderates sea and fire. It is to him one must pray for voyages and fishing. He is so rich and wealthy that he can grant wealth of lands or possessions to those that pray to him for this. Njord is not of the race of the Aesir. He was brought up in the land of Vanir. The Vanir gave him as hostage to the gods and took in exchange as an Aesir hostage the one called Haener. he came to the pledge of truce between the gods of the Vanir. Njord has a wife called Skadi, daughter of the giant Thiassi. Skadi wants to have the home her father had had. This is in some mountains, a place called Thurheim, but Njord wants to be near the sea. They agreed on this, that they should stay 9 nights in Thurheim and then alternate 9s at Nodden. But when Njord came back to Nodden from the mountain, he said this: I hate mountains. Not long was I there, just 9 nights, wolves howling. I felt ugly compared with the swan's song. Then Skaldi said this: I could not sleep on the sea's beds for the birds screaming. He wakes me who comes from out at sea every morning, that gull. Then Skaldi went up into the mountain and lived in Thurheim, and generally travels on skis and carries a bow and shoots game. She is called Ski Deity or Ski Lady, as it says. It is called Thurheim where Thiassi dwelt, that most mighty giant. But now Skadi, bright bride of gods, inhabits her father's old abode. Njord of Notton had afterwards 2 children. The son was called Freyr, and the daughter Freya. They were beautiful in appearance and mighty. Freyr is the most glorious of the Aesir. He is ruler of rain and sunshine, and thus of the produce of the earth, and it is good to pray to him for prosperity and peace. He also rules over the wealth of men, and Freya is the most glorious of the Aesir. She has a dwelling in heaven called Folkvangar, and wherever she rides to battle she gets half the slain, and the other half Odin, as it says here. There is a place called Folkvang, and there Freya is in charge of allotting seats in the hall. Half the slain she chooses each day, and half has Odin. Says Remer, her hall, it is large and beautiful, and when she travels she drives 2 cats and sits in a chariot. She is the most approachable one for people to pray to, and from her name is derived the honorific title whereby noble ladies are called Frovur, noble ladies. She was very fond of love songs. It is good to pray to her concerning love affairs. Then spoke Angleri. Most important these Aesir seem to me to be, and it is not surprising that great power is within you when you claim to know details about the gods and know which one must be prayed to for every prayer. But are there yet more gods? I said, there is also an ass called Tur. He is the bravest and most valiant, and he has great power over victory in battles. It is good for men of action to pray to him. There is a saying that a man is tie valiant, who surpasses other men and does not hesitate. He was so clever that a man who is clever is said to be tie wise. It is one proof of his bravery that when the Aesir were luring Varin's wolf to get the fetter Gleipnir on him, he did not trust them that they would let him go until they placed Tur's hand in the wolf's mouth as a pledge. And when the Aesir refused to let him go, then he bit off the hand at the place that is now called the wolf joint, wrist. And he is one-handed, and he is not considered a promoter of settlement between people. There is one called Bragi. He is renowned for wisdom and especially for eloquence and command of language. Especially he is knowledgeable about poetry, and because of him, poetry is called brag. And from his name, a person is said to be a brag, chief, of men or women who has eloquence beyond others, whether it is a woman or a man. Idun, his wife, she keeps in her casket apples which the gods have to feed on when they age, and then they all become young, and so it will go on right up to Ragnarok. Then spoke Angleri. It seems to me that the gods are staking a great deal on Idun's care and trustworthiness. Then spoke Hai, laughing. It nearly led to disaster on one occasion. I could tell you about that, but first you must hear the names of some more Aesir. There's one called Heimdall. He is known as the White Ass. He is great and holy. 9 maidens bore him as their son, all of them sisters. He is also called Halinskidi and Gilantani. His teeth were of gold. His horse is called Goltop. He lives in a place called Himmelbjorg by Bifrost. He is the god's watchman and sits there at the edge of heaven to guard the bridge against mountain giants. He needs less sleep than a bird. He can see, by night just as well as by day, a distance of 100 leagues. He can also hear grass growing on the earth, and wool on sheep, and everything that sounds louder than that. He has a trumpet called Yellowhorn, and its blast can be heard in all worlds. The head is referred to as Heimdall's sword. Thus it is said here. There is a place called Himmelbjorg, and there they say it is Heimdall who is ruler of the holy places. There the god's watchman drinks in the pleasant hall, merry the good mead. And moreover he says himself in Heimdallargaldr, offspring of 9 mothers am I, of 9 sisters am I the son. Hod is the name of one As. He is blind, only too strong is he, and the gods would prefer that this As did not need to be named. For the work of his hands will long be kept in mind among gods and men. Vidar is the name of one the silent As, and has a thick shoe. He is almost equal in strength to Thor. He is a source of great support to the gods in all dangers. Ali or Vali is the name of one, the son of Odin and Rind. He is bold in battles and a very good shot. Ul is the name of one, son of Sif, stepson of Thor. He is such a good archer and skier that no one can compete with him. He is also beautiful in appearance and has a warrior's accomplishments. He is a good one to pray to in single combat. Forseti is the name of the son of Balder and Nanna, Neb's daughter. He has a hall in heaven called Glitnir, and whoever comes to him with difficult legal disputes, they all leave with their differences settled. It is the best place of judgment among gods and men. Thus it says here. There is a hall called Glitnir. It is held up by golden pillars and likewise roofed with silver. There Forseti dwells most days and settles all disputes. That one is also reckoned among the Aesir, whom some call the Aesir's calumniator and originator of deceits, and the disgrace of all gods and men. His name is Loki, or Lopt, son of the giant Farbauti. Laufey or Nal is his mother. Byleist and Helblindi are his brothers. Loki is pleasing and handsome in appearance, evil in character, very capricious in behavior. He possessed to a greater degree than others the kind of learning that is called cunning, and tricks for every purpose. He was always getting the Aesir into a complete fix and often got them out of it by trickery. Sigyn is the name of his wife, Nari or Narfi their son. And Loki had other offspring too. There was a giantess called Angebroda in Giant Land. With her Loki had 3 children. One was Fenris Wolf, the second Lormungand, i.e. the Midgard serpent. The third is Hel. And when the gods realized that these 3 siblings were being brought up in Giant Land, and when the gods traced prophecies stating that from these siblings great mischief and disaster would arise for them, then they all felt evil was to be expected from them. To begin with, because of their mother's nature, but still worse, because of their fathers. Then all fathers sent the gods to get the children and bring them to him. And when they came to him, he threw the serpent into that deep sea which lies round all lands. And this serpent grew so that it lies in the midst of the ocean, encircling all lands, and bites on its own tail. Hel he threw into Niflheim and gave her authority over 9 worlds, such that she has to administer board and lodging to those sent to her, and that is those who die of sickness or old age. She has great mansions there, and her walls are exceptionally high, and the gates great. Her hall is called Eliodnir, her dish hunger, her knife famine, the servant Gangladi, serving maid Ganglot, her threshold where you enter stumbling block, her bed sick bed, her curtains gleaming bale. She is half black and half flesh-colored, thus she is easily recognizable, and rather downcast and fierce-looking. The Aesir brought up the wolf at home, and it was only Tyr who had the courage to approach the wolf and give it food. And when the gods saw how much it was growing each day, and all prophecies foretold that it was destined to cause them harm, then the Aesir adopted this plan, that they made a very strong fetter, which they called lading, and brought it to the wolf, and suggested he should try his strength with the fetter. The wolf decided that it was not beyond its strength, and let them do what they wished with it. At the first kick that the wolf made at it, this fetter broke. Thus he loosed himself from lading. Next the Aesir made a second fetter, twice as strong, which they called dromi, and asked the wolf again to try this fetter, and declared that he would achieve great fame for his strength if such mighty pieces of engineering could not hold him. The wolf thought to himself that this fetter was very strong, but also that his strength had grown since he broke lading. It occurred to him that he would have to take some risks if he was to achieve fame, and allowed the fetter to be put on him. And when the Aesir declared they were ready, the wolf shook himself and knocked the fetter on the ground and strained hard, kicked with his feet, broke the fetter so that the fragments flew far away. Thus he struck himself out of dromi. Since then it has been used as a saying to lose from lading or strike out of dromi when something is achieved with great effort. After this, the Aesir began to fear that they would not manage to get the wolf bound. Then Allfather sent someone called Skirnir, Freyr's messenger, down into the world of black elves to some dwarfs, and had a fetter called Gleipnir made. It was made of 6 ingredients: the sound of the cat's footfall and the woman's beard, the mountain's roots, and the bear's sinews, and the fish's breath and bird's spittle. And even if you did not know this information before, you can now discover true proofs that you are not being deceived in the following. You must have seen that a woman has no beard, and there is no noise from a cat's running, and there are no roots under a mountain. And I declare now by my faith that everything I have told you is just as true, even if there are some things that you cannot test. Then spoke Angleri. I can indeed see that this is true. I can understand the things that you have given as proofs, but what was the fetter made like? I said, I can easily tell you that. The fetter was smooth and soft like a silken ribbon, but as firm and strong as you shall now hear. When the fetter was brought to the Aesir, and they thanked the messenger heartily for carrying out their errand, then the Aesir went out onto the lake called Amesvatnir, onto an island called Lyngvi, and summoned with them the wolf, showed him the silky band, and made him tear it, and declared it was rather firmer than seemed likely, judging from its thickness, and passed it to each other, and tried it by pulling at it with their hands, and it did not tear. Yet the wolf, they said, would tear it. Then the wolf replied, It looks to me with this ribbon as though I will gain no fame from it if I do tear apart such a slender band. But if it is made with art and trickery, then even if it does look thin, this band is not going on my legs. Then the Aesir said that he would soon tear apart a slender silken band, seeing that he had earlier broken great iron fetters. But if you cannot manage to tear this band, then you will present no terror to the gods, and so we will free you. The wolf said, If you bind me so that I am unable to release myself, then you will be standing by in such a way that I should have to wait a long time before I got any help from you. I am reluctant to have this band put on me, but rather than that you question my courage, let someone put his hand in my mouth as a pledge that this is done in good faith. But all the Aesir looked at each other and found themselves in a dilemma, and all refused to offer their hands until Tyr put forward his right hand and put it in the wolf's mouth. And now when the wolf kicked, the band grew harder, and the harder he struggled, the tougher became the band. Then they all laughed except for Tyr. He lost his hand. When the Aesir saw that the wolf was thoroughly bound, they took the cord that was hanging from the fetter, which is called gelgia, and threaded it through a great stone slab. This is called Gylfe, and fastened the slab far down in the ground. Then they took a great rock and thrust it even further into the ground. This is called Viti, and used this rock as an anchoring peg. The wolf stretched its jaws enormously and reacted violently and tried to bite them. They thrust into its mouth a certain sword. The hilt touches its lower gums and the point its upper ones. This is its gum prop. It howls horribly and saliva runs from its mouth. This forms the river called Hope. There it will lie until Ragnarok. Then spoke Ngleri. It was a pretty terrible family that Loki begot, and all these siblings are important, but why did not the Aesir kill the wolf, since they can expect evil from him? I replied, so greatly did the gods respect their holy places and places of sanctuary that they did not want to defile them with the wolf's blood, even though the prophecies say that he will be the death of Odin. Then spoke Ngleri, who are the Asgard? I said, the highest is Frigg. She has a dwelling called Fensalir, and it is very splendid. Second is Saga. She dwells at Skobavek, and that is a big place. Third is Air. She is an extremely good physician. Fourth is Gylfe. She is a virgin and is attended by all who die as virgins. Fifth is Fula. She too is a virgin and goes around with hair flowing free and has a gold band around her head. She carries Frigg's casket and looks after her footwear and shares her secrets. Freya is highest in rank, next to Frigg. She was married to someone called Odd. Nos is the name of their daughter. She's so beautiful that from her name, whatever is beautiful and precious is called Nosir, treasures. Odd went off on long travels, and Freya stayed behind weeping, and her tears are red gold. Freya has many names, and the reason for this is that she adopted various names when she was traveling among strange peoples looking for Odd. She's called Mardol and Horn, Geffen, Sir. Freya owned Brising's necklace. She is known as Lady of the Vanir. Seventh is Sjoft. She is much concerned to direct people's mind to love, both women and men. It is from her name that affection is called Siafni. Eighth, Lofn. She is so kind and good to pray to that she gets leave from Allfather or Frigg for people's union between women and men, even if before it was forbidden or refused. Hence, it is from her name that it is called Lof, permission, as well as when something is praised, Lofat, greatly by people. Ninth, Var. She listens to people's oaths and private agreements that women and men make between each other. Thus, these contracts are called Varar. She also punishes those who break them. 10th, Vor. She is wise and inquiring, so that nothing can be concealed from her. There is a saying that a woman becomes aware, Vor, of something when she finds out. 11th, Sin. She guards the doors of the hall and shuts them against those who are not to enter. She is appointed as a defense at assemblies against matters that she wishes to refute. Thus there is a saying that a denial, sin, is made when one says no. 12th, Lin. She is given the function of protecting people whom Frigg wishes to save from some danger. From this comes the saying that someone who escapes finds refuge, Leinir. 13th, Snotra. She is wise and courteous. From her name, a woman or man who is a wise person is called Snorri. 14th, Na. She is sent by Frigg into various worlds to carry out her business. She has a horse that gallops across sky and sea called Hofvarpnir. It happened once as she was riding that some Vanir saw her traveling through the sky, then said once, "What is it flying there? What is it traveling there, passing through the sky?" She said, "I'm not flying, though I travel and pass through the sky on Hofvarpnir, whom Hamskarpir begot on Gardrofa." From Na's name, a thing is said to tower, Nefa, when it goes high up. Sol and Bil are reckoned among the Esnir, but their characteristics have been mentioned above. There are still others, whose function it is to wait in Valhal, serve drink, and look after the tableware and drinking vessels. Thus are they named in Grimnismal. Rist and Mist I desire should bring me a horn. Skegjold and Skogel, Hild and Thrud, Glock and Herfjotur, Gol and Gerahad, Rangrid and Radgrid and Grangelleif, these serve ale to the Einherjar. These are all called Valkyries. Odin sends them to every battle. They allot death to men and govern victory. Gun and Rota, and the youngest Norn, called Skuld, always ride to choose who shall be slain and to govern the killings. Thor's mother Jord and Vali's mother Rind are reckoned among the Asinur. There was someone called Gjimr and his wife Arboda. She was of the race of mountain giants. Gerd is their daughter, the most beautiful of all women. It happened one day that Freyr had gone into Hidskjalf and was looking over all worlds, and when he looked to the north he saw on a certain homestead a large and beautiful building, and to this building went a woman. And when she lifted her arms and opened the door for herself, light was shed from her arms over both sky and sea, and all worlds were made bright by her. And his punishment for his great presumption in having sat in that holy seat was that he went away full of grief. And when he got home, he said nothing. He neither slept nor drank. No one dared to try to speak with him. Then Njord sent for Freyr's servant Skirnir, and bade him to go to Freyr and try to get him to talk and ask who he was so angry with that he would not speak to anyone. Skirnir said he would go, though he was not keen, and said unpleasant answers were to be expected from him. And when he got to Freyr, he asked why Freyr was so downcast and would not speak to anyone. Then Freyr replied and said he had seen a beautiful woman, and for her sake he was so full of grief that he would not live long if he were not to have her. And now you must go and ask for her hand on my behalf, and bring her back here whether her father is willing or not, and I shall reward you well for it. Then Skirnir replied, saying that he would undertake the mission, but Freyr must give him his sword. This was such a good sword that it would fight on its own. But Freyr did not let the lack of that be an obstacle and gave him the sword. Then Skirnir went and asked for the woman's hand for him and received the promise from her, and 9 nights later she was to go to the place called Barry and enter marriage with Freyr. But when Skirnir told Freyr the result of his errand, he said this: "Long is a night, long is a second. How can I suffer for 3? Often has a month seemed shorter to me than half this wedding eve." This is the reason for Freyr so being unarmed when he fought Beli, killing him with a stag's antler. Then spoke Angleri, "It is very strange that such a prince as Freyr should want to give away his sword when he did not have another that was as good. This would have been a terrible handicap for him when he fought with the one called Beli. I dare swear by my faith that he must then have regretted this gift." Then I replied, "It did not matter much when he and Beli met. Freyr could have killed him with his fist. There will come a time when Freyr will find being without the sword a greater disadvantage, when Muspel's sons come and wage war." Then spoke Angleri, "You say that all those men that have fallen in battle since the beginning of the world have now come to Odin in Valhal. What has he got to offer them for food? I should have thought that there must be a pretty large number there." Then I replied, "It is true what you say, there is a pretty large number there, and many more have yet to arrive, and yet there will seem too few when the wolf comes. But there will never be such a large number in Valhal that the meat of the boar called Sarimnir will not be sufficient for them. It is cooked each day, and whole again by evening. But this question that you are now asking, it seems to me very likely that there can be few so wise as to be able to give the correct answer to it. The cook is called Adrimnir, and the pot Eldrimnir. Thus it says here. Adrimnir has Sarimnir cooked in Eldrimnir, best of meats, but there are few that know on what the Einridrar feed." Then spoke Angleri, "Does Odin have the same fare as the Einherjar?" I said, "The food that stands on his table he gives to 2 wolves of his called Geri and Freki. He himself needs no food. Wine is for him both drink and meat. Thus it says here. Geri and Freki, the battle-accustomed father of hosts, feeds, but on wine alone splendidly weaponed Odin ever lives. 2 ravens sit on his shoulders and speak into his ear all the news they see or hear. Their names are Hugin and Munin. He sends them out at dawn to fly over all the world, and they return at dinner time. As a result, he gets to find out about many events. From this he gets the name Raven God, as it says. Hugin and Munin fly each day over the mighty earth. I fear for Hugin lest he come not back, yet I am afraid more about Munin. Then spoke Ungleri. What do the Einherjar have as drink that lasts them as plentifully as the food? Is water drunk there? Then said Hai, this is a strange question you are asking. Whether All-Father would invite kings and earls and other men of rank to his house and would give them water to drink, and I swear by my faith that there comes many a one to Valhal who would think he had paid a high price for his drink of water if there were no better cheer to be got there, when he had previously endured wounds and agony leading to his death. I can tell you a different story about this. There is a goat called Hedrun, standing on top of Valhal, feeding on the foliage from the branches of that tree whose name is well known. It is called a rod, and from the goat's udder flows mead, with which it fills a vat each day. This is so big that all Einherjar can drink their fill from it. Then spoke Ungleri. That is a terribly handy goat for them. It must be a jolly good tree that it is feeding on. Then spoke I. There is a matter of even more note regarding the stag Eikthirnir, which stands on Valhal and feeds on the branches of this tree, and from its horn comes such a great dripping that it flows down into Velgarmir, and from there flow the rivers whose names are Sid, Vid, Second, Ekin, Sval, Gunthro, Fjorm, Fimblethul, Gippel, Gopal, Gomul, Gervamul. These flow through where the Aesir live. These are the names of others: Thin, Vin, Thol, Ball, Grad, Gunthrain, Nit, Not, Non, Ron, Vina, Veg, Svin, Theodnuma. Then spoke Ungleri. That is amazing information that you have just given. Valhal must be a terribly large building. It must often get pretty crowded around the doorways. Then Hai replied, why don't you ask how many doors there are in Valhal and how wide they are? If you hear about this, then what you will say is that on the contrary, it is amazing if everyone cannot go out and in that wants to. But to tell you the truth, it is not more crowded when it is occupied than when it is being entered. You can hear about it here in Grimnismal. 500 doors and yet 40 more. That is what I think are in Valhal. 800 Einherjar will go at once through one doorway when they and the wolf go to fight. Then spoke Ungleri. There is a very large number of people in Valhal. I declare by my salvation that Odin is a very great lord when he commands such a great troop. But what entertainment do the Einherjar have when they are not drinking? I said, each day after they have got dressed, they put on war gear and go out into the courtyard and fight each other, and they fall each upon the other. This is their sport. And when dinner time approaches, they ride back to Valhal and sit down to drink, as it says here. All Einherjar in Odin's courts fight one another each day. They select their victims and from battle ride, sit the more at peace together. But it is true what you said. A mighty one is Odin. There is much evidence that points to this. Thus it says here in the words of the Aesir themselves. The ash Yggdrasil, this is the foremost of trees, and Skidblodnir of ships, Odin of the Aesir, of horses Sleipnir, Bifrost of bridges, and Bragi of poets, Habrock of hawks, and of dogs Garm. Then spoke Ungleri. Whose is the horse Sleipnir, and what is there to tell about it? I said, you do not know details of Sleipnir and are not acquainted with the circumstances of its origin. But you will find this worth listening to. It was right at the beginning of the gods' settlement. When the gods had established Midgard and built Valhal, there came there a certain builder and offered to build them a fortification in 3 seasons, so good that it would be reliable and secure against mountain giants and frost giants, even though they should come in over Midgard. and he stipulated, as his payment, that he should get Freya as his wife, and he wished to have the sun and moon. Then Aesir went into discussion and had a conference, and this bargain was made with the builder that he should get what he demanded if he managed to build a fortification in one winter, but on the first day of summer, if there was anything unfinished in the fortification, then he should forfeit his payment. He was to receive from no man help with the work. And when they told him these terms, then he asked that they should permit him to have the help of his stallion called Svadilfari. And it was Loki that was responsible for this being granted him. He set to work the first day of winter to build the fortification, and at night he hauled up stone with the stallion. And the Aesir thought it a great marvel what enormous rocks the stallion hauled, and the stallion performed twice the deed of strength that the builder did. But at their agreement there had been mighty witnesses invoked and many oaths, for the giants did not think it safe to be among the Aesir without a guarantee of safety if Thor were to return home. But at the time he was gone away into eastern parts to thrash trolls. And as winter passed, the building of the fortification advanced rapidly, and it was so high and strong that it could not be stormed. And when summer was 3 days away, then he had almost got round to the entrance of the fortification. Then the gods took their places on their judgment seats and tried to think of what to do, and asked each other who had been responsible for the decision to marry Freya into Giantland and to spoil the sky and heaven by taking away sun and moon and giving them to giants. And there was an agreement among them all that he must have been responsible for his decision who was responsible for most evil. Loki Lofarirson, and declared he would deserve an evil death if he did not find a scheme whereby the builder would forfeit his payment, and they offered to attack Loki. And he, being afraid, swore oaths that he would manage things so the builder would forfeit his payment, whatever it cost him to do it. And the same evening, when the builder drove out for stone with his stallion, Svaldafari, there ran out of a certain wood a mare up to the stallion and neighed at it. And when the stallion realized what kind of horse it was, it went frantic and tore apart the tackle and ran towards the mare, and she away to the wood, and the builder after them, trying to catch the stallion, and these horses ran around all night, and the building work was held up for that night. The next day, not as much building was done as had been the case previously, and when the builder realized that the work was not going to be completed, then the builder got into a giant rage. But when the Aesir saw for certain that it was a mountain giant that they had there, then the oaths were disregarded, and they called upon Thor, and he came in a thrice, and the next thing was that Mjolnir was raised aloft. Then he paid the builder's wages, and it wasn't the sun and moon. Instead, he stopped him from living in Giantland and struck the first blow so that his skull was shattered into fragments, and sent him down beneath Niflhel. But Loki had had such dealings with Svadilfari that somewhat later he gave birth to a foal. It was grey and had 8 legs, and this is the best horse among gods and men. Thus it says in Völuspá. Then went all the powers to their judgment seats, most holy gods, and deliberated upon this, who had tainted all the sky with darkness, and to the family of giants given Od's beloved. Oaths were gone back on, pledge words and promises, all the solemn vows that passed between them. Thor achieved this alone, bursting with wrath. He seldom sits idle when he learns of such things. Then spoke Angleri. What is there to be told about Skiblarnir if it is the best of ships? Is there no other ship as good as it or as big? Hai said, Skiblarnir is the best ship and constructed with greatest ingenuity, but the biggest ship is Nalgolfari. It belongs to Muspel. It was certain dwarfs, sons of Ivaldi, that made Skidblarnir and gave Freyr the ship. It is big enough for all the Aesir to be able to go aboard it with weapons and war gear, and it gets a fair wind as soon as the sail is hoisted wherever it is required to go. And when it is not to be taken to sea, then it is made of so many parts, and with such great art that it can be folded up like a cloth and put in one's pocket. Then spoke Angleri. Skiblarnir is a good ship, but it must require a great deal of magic to make something like that. Has Thor never got into such a situation that he has come up against such great power or might that he has found it more than he could manage because of strength or magic? Then spoke I expect there are few people that can tell about that, though he has found many situations hard to deal with. But even if it has happened that something or other has been so powerful or strong that Thor has not managed to defeat it, yet there's no need to speak of it, for there is much evidence to show, and everyone is bound to believe, that Thor is mightiest. Then spoke Ungleri. It looks to me as though I must have asked you something that none of you is capable of telling me. Then spoke just as high. We have heard tell of some events which it seems to us impossible to believe can be true, but I guess there is one sitting not far off who will be able to give a true account of it, and you can be confident that he will not lie now for the first time who never lied before. Then spoke Ungleri. Here I shall stand and listen whether anyone offers a solution to this matter, and if not, I declare you are overcome if you are not able to tell what I ask. Then spoke Third. It is clear now that he is determined to know this story, even though it does not seem to us nice to tell, but you are not to interrupt. The beginning of this business is that Oku Thor set off with his goats and chariot, and with him the ass called Loki. In the evening they arrived at a peasant's house and were given a night's lodging there. During the evening Thor took his goats and slaughtered them both. After this they were skinned and put in the pot. When it was cooked, Thor sat down to his evening meal, he and his companion. Thor invited the peasant and his wife and their children to share the meal with him. The farmer's son was called Thjalfi, his daughter Röskva. Then Thor placed the goatskins on the other side of the fire and instructed the peasant and his household to throw the bones onto the goatskins. Thjalfi, the peasant's son, took hold of the goat's ham bone and split it open with his knife and broke it to get at the marrow. Thor stayed the night there, and in the small hours before dawn he got up and dressed, took the hammer Mjolnir and raised it and blessed the goatskins. Then the goats got up, and one of them was lame in the hind leg. Thor noticed this and declared that the peasant or one of his people must have not treated the goat's bones with proper care. He realized that the ham bone was broken. There's no need to make a long tale about it. Everyone can imagine how terrified the peasant must have been when he saw Thor making his brows sink down over his eyes. As for what could be seen of the eyes themselves, he thought he would collapse at just the very sight. Thor clenched his hands on the shaft of the hammer so that the knuckles went white, and the peasant did as one might expect, and all his household, they cried out fervently, begged for grace, offered to atone with all their possessions. And when he saw their terror, then his wrath left him, and he calmed down and accepted from them in settlement their children, Thjalfi and Röskva, and they then became Thor's bondservants, and they have attended him ever since. He left the goats behind there and started on his journey east to Giant Land and all the way to the sea, and then he went out across the great deep sea. And when he reached land, he went ashore, and with him Loki and Thjalfi and Röskva. When they had gone a little way, they were faced by a huge forest. They walked all that day until dark. Thjalfi was the fastest of the runners. He carried Thor's knapsack, but there was not much in the way of lodgings to be found. When it had got dark, they looked for somewhere to spend the night and came upon a certain very large building. There was an entrance at one end, and it was the full width of the building. Here they sought night quarters for themselves. But at midnight there was a great earthquake. The ground moved under them in shudders, and the building shook. Then Thor got up and called to his companions, and they searched around and found a side chamber on the right-hand side halfway down the building and went in. Thor positioned himself in the doorway, and the others were further in behind him, and they were fearful. But Thor clasped the shaft of his hammer and planned to defend himself. Then they heard a great rumbling and groaning. And when dawn came, Thor went out and saw someone lying a little way from him in the forest, and he was no midget. He was asleep and snoring mightily. Then Thor realized what the cause of the noise in the night had been. He clasped on his girdle of might, and his ass strength grew. But at that moment the person awoke and stood up quickly. And then they say that Thor for once was afraid to strike him with the hammer, and asked him his name. And he said his name was Skirnir. "But I do not need," he said, "to ask you your name. I can tell that you are Thor of the Aesir. But have you been making off with my glove?" Then Skirnir reached over and picked up his glove. Then Thor realized that this was what he had been using during the night as a building, and the side chamber, that was the thumb of the glove. Skirnir asked if Thor would like to have his company, and Thor agreed. Then Skirnir went and undid his knapsack and got ready to eat breakfast, and so did Thor and his companions in a separate place. Then Skirnir suggested that they pool their food, and Thor agreed. So Skirnir tied up all their provisions in one bag and put it on his back. He went ahead during the day and took rather long strides, and then in the evening Skirnir found them a place to spend the night under a certain large oak. "But you take the knapsack and get on with your supper." Then Skirnir went to sleep and snored hard, and Thor took the knapsack and was about to undo it. And the story goes, incredible though it must seem, that no knot could he get undone, and no strap-end moved so as to make it less tight than it was already. And when he realized that his labor was going to get nowhere, he got angry, grasped the hammer Mjolnir in both hands, and stepped forward with one foot to where Skirnir was lying and struck at his head. Skirnir awoke and asked whether some leaf of foliage had fallen on his head, and whether they had finished eating and were ready for bed. Thor said they were just about to go to sleep. They then went under another oak. To tell you the truth, it was not possible to sleep without fear. But at midnight, Thor heard that Skirnir was snoring and sleeping deeply so that the forest resounded. Then he stood up and went up to him, swung the hammer quickly and hard, and struck down in the center of his crown. He felt the face of the hammer sink deep into the head. At that moment, Skirnir woke and said, "What's the matter now? Did an acorn or something fall on my head? And what are you doing, Thor?" But Thor backed away quickly and replied that he had just woken up, said that it was now midnight and still time to sleep. Then Thor resolved that if he got an opportunity to strike him a third blow, he would never open his eyes again. He now lay waiting to see if Skirnir fell fast asleep. And a little before dawn, then he could hear that Skirnir must have fallen asleep, and he got up and ran at him, swung the hammer with all his might, and struck at the temple that was facing upwards. Then the hammer sank in up to the handle, but Skirnir sat up and stroked his cheek and said, "Can there be some birds sitting in the tree above me? I am sure as I awoke that some rubbish from the branches fell on my head. Are you awake, Thor? It must be time to get up and dress, and you do not now have very far to go on to the castle called Asgard. I have heard you whispering among yourselves that I am a person of no small build, but you will see bigger men there if you get into Asgard. Now, I will give you some good advice. Don't act big. Utgarda Loki's men will not easily put up with cheekiness from babies like you. Otherwise, turn back, and that I think will be the better course for you to take. But if you are determined to go on, then make for the east. But my road now lies to the north, to these mountains that you should be able to see." Skirnir took the knapsack and threw it on his back and turned abruptly away from them into the forest, and there is no report that Aesir expressed hope for a happy reunion. Thor continued his journey with his companions and went on until midday. Then they saw a castle standing on some open ground and had to bend their heads back to touch their spines before they could see up over. They approached the castle, and there was a gate across the entrance, and it was shut. Thor went to the gate and was unable to open it, but by struggling to get into the castle they squeezed between the bars and thus got in, and then saw a great hall and went up to it. The door was open. They went in and saw there many people on 2 benches, most of them of fair size. Next they came before the king, Utgarda Loki, and addressed him. But he was slow to turn to them and bared his teeth in a smile and said, "News travels slowly over long distances, but am I wrong in thinking that this little fellow is Oku Thor? You must be bigger than you look to me. And what are the feats that your party thinks they can perform? No one is allowed to stay here with us who does not have some art or skill in which he is superior to most people." Then the one who was in the rear of the party, which was Loki, said, "I know a feat that I am quite prepared to have a go at, that there is no one inside here who can eat this food quicker than I." Then Utgarda Loki replied, "That is a feat if you can perform it, and we must try out these feats." Called down the bench that someone called Logi was to come out onto the floor and compete with Loki. Then a trencher was fetched and brought in onto the floor of the hall and filled with meat. Loki sat down at one end and Logi at the other, and each ate as quickly as he could, and they met in the middle of the trencher. Loki had then eaten all the meat off the bones, but Logi had also eaten all the meat and the bones too, and also the trencher, and it seemed to everyone now that Loki had lost the contest. Then Utgarda Loki asked what that young man there could perform, and Gylfe said that he would attempt to run a race of some kind with anyone Utgarda Loki put forward. He said, Utgarda Loki, that this was a good feat, and declared he would indeed have to be good at running if he was to achieve this feat, and yet he said he would soon put it to the test. Then Utgarda Loki got up and went out, and there was a good course there for running over level ground. Then Utgarda Loki called to him a certain little fellow called Hugi, and bade him run a race with Gylfe. Then they began the first race, and Hugi was so far ahead that he turned back to meet him at the end of the race. Then said Utgarda Loki, "You will have to make a great effort, Gylfe, if you're going to win the contest. And yet it is true that never before have people come here that have seemed to me able to run faster than that." Then they began again another race, and when Hugi got to the end of the course and turned back, Gylfe was still a good arrow shot behind. Then said Utgarda Loki, "Gylfe has, I think, run a good race, but I no longer have any confidence in him that he will win the contest, but we shall see now when they run the third race." Then they started another race, and when Hugi had got to the end of the course and turned back, then Gylfe had not reached halfway, then everyone said that this contest was decided. Then Utgarda Loki asked Thor which of his accomplishments it was that he would be willing to display before them, such a great stories as people had made of his exploits. Then Thor said that he would most willingly undertake to compete at drinking with someone. Utgarda Loki said that would be fine, and went inside the hall and called for his butler, bade him get the forfeit horn that the men of his court were accustomed to drink from. Next the butler came forward with the horn and handed it to Thor. Then said Utgarda Loki, "From this horn it is considered to be well drunk if it is drained in 1 draught, but some people drain it in 2 draughts, but no one is such a poor drinker that it is not emptied in 3. Thor looked at the horn, and it did not seem all that big, though it was rather long. But he was very thirsty, began to drink and took great gulps, and intended that it should not be necessary to address the horn again for the time being. But when he ran out of breath and straightened up from the horn and saw how his drinking was progressing, it seemed to him as though there could be very little difference, by which the level in the horn was now lower than before. Then Utgarda Loki spoke. "That was a good drink, and not excessive. I would not have believed it if anyone had told me that Thor of Aesir would not have drunk a greater draught, but still I know that you will be intending to drink it off in the 2nd draught." Thor made no reply, put the horn to his mouth and was determined now that he was going to drink big or rot, and struggled with the drink as long as his breath held out, and found still that the point of the horn would not go as far as he wanted. And when he took the horn from his mouth and looked in, it now seemed to him as though it had gone down less than previous time. The level was now far enough down for the horn to be carried easily without spilling. Then spoke Loki. "What's the matter now, Thor? Are you not keeping back for one drink more than you will find easy to manage? It seems to me that if you're going to drain the horn with the third draught, then this must be intended to be the biggest one. But here among us, you will not be able to be reckoned as great a person as the Asas say you are, if you do not give a better account of yourself in other contests than it seems to me you're going to do with this one." Then Thor got angry, put the horn to his mouth, and drank as hard as he could, and struggled as long as possible with the drink. And when he looked into the horn, this time it had made most of all some difference. And then he handed back the horn and would drink no more. Then spoke Loki. "It is obvious now that your might is not as great as we thought. Do you want to have a try at more contests? It is clear that you are going to get nowhere with this one." Thor replied, "I may as well have a try at yet more contests. But I would have been surprised when I was back home with the Aesir if such drinks had been reckoned so light. And what game do you want to offer me now?" Then spoke Loki. "What the young lads here do, though it may not seem of great significance, is lift off my cat off the ground. But I would not know how to mention such a thing to Thor of the Aesir if I had not previously seen that you are a much less impressive person than I thought." Next, a kind of gray cat ran out on the hall floor, and it was rather big. Thor went up and took hold with his hand down under the middle of its belly and lifted it up. But the cat arched its back as much as Thor stretched up his hand, and when Thor reached as high up as the furthest he could, then the cat raised just one paw, and Thor was not able to perform this feat. Then spoke Loki. "This game went just as I expected. The cat is rather big, but Thor is short and small in comparison with the big fellows here with us." Then spoke Thor. "Small as you say I am, just let someone come out and fight me. Now I am angry." Then Loki replied, looking round the benches, and said, "I do not see anyone in here who will not think it demeaning to fight with you." And then he went on, "Let's see a moment. Call here to me the old woman, my nurse Ellie, and let Thor fight with her if he likes. She has brought down people who have seemed to me no less strong-looking than Thor is." Next there came into the hall an old crone. Then Loki said that she was to have a wrestling match with Thor of Aesir. There is not a great deal to be told about it. What happened in this match was that the harder Thor strained in the wrestling, the firmer she stood. Then the old woman started to try tricks, and then Thor began to lose his footing, and there was some very hard pulling, and it was not long before Thor fell onto the knee of one leg. Then Loki went up, told him to stop the wrestling, and said this, that there was no point in Thor challenging any more people in his hall to a fight. It was also now late into the night. Loki showed Thor and his companions to places, and they spent the night there with hospitable treatment. And in the morning, as soon as it dawned, Thor got up, and so did his companions. They got dressed, and were about to be off. Then Loki appeared, and had a table laid for them. There was no lack of good cheer, food and drink. And when they had finished eating, then they set off. Loki went out with them, and accompanied them on their road out of the castle. And as they parted, Loki spoke to Thor, and asked how he thought his expedition had gone, and whether he had come up against any person more powerful than himself. Thor said that he could not claim that he had not suffered great loss of face in their encounter. "And moreover, I know that you will say that I am a person of little account, and it is that which irks me." Then spoke Loki. "Now you shall be told the truth. Now you have come outside the castle, which is that if I live and can have my way, you shall never again come into it. And I swear by my faith that you never would have come into it if I had known before that you had such great strength in you, and that you were going to bring us so close to great disaster. But I have deceived you by appearances, so that the first time when I discovered you in the forest, it was I that came and met you. And when you tried to undo the knapsack, I had fastened it with trickwire, and you could not find where it had to be unfastened. And next you struck me 3 blows with your hammer, and the first was the smallest, and yet it was so hard that it would have been enough to kill me if it had struck its mark. But where you saw near my hall a table mountain, and down in it you saw 3 square valleys, one deepest of all, these were the marks of your hammer. I moved the table mountain in front of your blows, but you did not notice. So it was 2 with the games in which you competed with my men. The first was the one that Loke engaged in. He was very hungry and ate fast, but the one who is called Logi, flame, that was wildfire, and it burned the trencher just as quickly as the meat. And when Thjalfi competed at running with the one called Hugi, thought, that was my thought, and Thjalfi was not likely to be able to compete with its speed. And when you were drinking from the horn and it seemed to you that it was going slowly, I swear by my faith that then there took place a miracle that I would not have believed possible. The other end of the horn was out in the sea, and you did not notice. But now, when you come to the sea, then you will see what a lowering of the level you have made in the sea by your drinking. This is now known as the tides. And he went on. It did not seem to me any less impressive either when you lifted up the cat. And to tell you the truth, everyone that was watching was terrified when you raised one of its foot from the ground. For that cat was not what it appeared to you. It was Midgard's serpent, which lies encircling all lands, and its length was hardly enough for both its head and its tail to touch the ground. And so far did you reach up that you were not far from the sky. And that also was a great miracle with the wrestling, when you stood so long and fell no further than on to the knee of one leg when you were fighting Ellie, old age. For there never has been anyone, and there never will be anyone, if they get so old that they experience old age, that old age will not bring them all down. And the truth I must tell you now is that we must part, and it will now be better on both sides that you do not come to see me again. I shall again next time defend my castle with similar tricks or with others, so that you will not get any power over me. And when Thor heard this speech, he snatched up his hammer and swung it in the air. But when he was about to bring it down, then he found he could nowhere see Utgarda Loki. And then he turned back towards the castle, intending to smash the castle. Then all he saw there was a wide and beautiful open landscape, but no castle. Then he turned back and went on his way until he got back to Thurbangar. But the fact is that he had then made up his mind to seek an opportunity for a meeting to take place between him and the Midgard serpent, as later occurred. Now I think there is no one that can give you a truer account of this expedition of Thor's. Then spoke Angleri. Very powerful is Utgarda Loki, and he uses a great deal of trickery and magic. It is clear that he is powerful when he had men in his following who have great might. But did Thor never get his own back for this? Hai replied, It is no secret, even among those who are not scholars, that Thor achieved redress for this expedition that has just been recounted, and did not stay at home long before setting out on his journey so hastily that he had with him no chariot and no goats and no companionship. He went out across Midgard having assumed the appearance of a young boy, and arrived one evening at nightfall at a certain giant's. His name was Heimer. Thor stayed there as a guest for the night, and at dawn Heimer got up and dressed and got ready to row out to sea fishing. And Thor sprang up and was soon ready and asked Heimer to let him row out to sea with him. But Heimer said there would not be much advantage in having him along since he was small and just a youth. And you'll get cold if I stay out as long and as far as I am used to do. But Thor said he need not hesitate to row out from shore, since it was not certain whether it would be he that would first beg to row back. And Thor got angry with the giant so that he was on the point of letting the hammer crash down on him straight away, but he decided to hold back since he was planning to try his strength elsewhere. He asked Heimer what they were to use as bait, but Heimer told him to get his own bait. Then Thor went off to where he could see a certain herd of oxen belonging to Heimer. He took the biggest ox, called Himmerite, and tore off his head and took it down to the sea. Heimer had now launched the boat. Thor went aboard and took his seat in the well of the boat, took 2 oars and rowed, and Heimer thought there was some impetus from his rowing. Heimer was rowing forward in the bows and rowing progress fast. Then Heimer said they had reached the fishing ground where he usually sat catching flatfish, but Thor said he wanted to row much further, and they did another spurt of rowing. Then Heimer said they had got so far out that it was dangerous to be further out because of the Midgard serpent. But Thor said he would row a bit, and did so. But Heimer was then very unhappy, and when Thor had shipped his oars, he got out a line that was pretty strong, and the hook was no smaller or less mighty looking. Onto this hook Thor fastened the ox head and threw it overboard, and the hook went to the bottom. And then it is true to say that Thor fooled the Midgard serpent no less than Utgarda Loki had made a laughing stock of Thor when he was lifting the serpent up with his hand. The Midgard serpent stretched its mouth round the ox head, and the hook stuck into the roof of the serpent's mouth. And when the serpent felt this, it jerked away so hard that both Thor's fists banged down on the gunwale. Then Thor got angry and summoned up his ass strength, pushed down so hard that he forced both feet through the boat and braced them against the seabed, and then hauled the serpent up to the gunwale. And one can claim that a person does not know what a horrible sight is who did not get to see how Thor fixed his eyes on the serpent, and the serpent stared back up at him, spitting poison. It is said that then the giant Heimer changed color, went pale, and panicked when he saw the serpent and how the sea flowed out and in over the boat. And just at the moment when Thor was grasping his hammer and lifting it in the air, the giant fumbled at his bait knife and cut Thor's line from the gunwale, and the serpent sank into the sea. But Thor threw his hammer after it, and they say that he struck off its head by the seabed. But I think in fact the contrary is correct to report to you that the Midgard serpent lives still and lies in the encircling sea. But Thor swung his fist and struck at Heimer's ears so that he plunged overboard and one could see the soles of his feet. But Thor waded ashore. Then spoke Angleri. Have any greater events taken place among the Aesir? It was very great exploit that Thor achieved on this expedition. Hai replied, there are events to be related that would have been thought more significant by the Aesir, and the beginning of this story is that Balder the Good dreamed great dreams boding peril to his life. And when he told the Aesir the dreams, they took counsel together, and it was decided to request immunity for Balder from all kinds of danger. And Frigg received solemn promises so that Balder should not be harmed by fire and water, iron, and all kinds of metal, stones, the earth, trees, diseases, the animals, the birds, poison, snakes. And when this was done and confirmed, then it became an entertainment for Balder and the Aesir that he should stand up at assemblies, and all others should either shoot at him, or strike at him, or throw stones at him. But whatever they did, he was unharmed, and they all thought this was a great glory. But when Loki Lofariusson saw this, he was not pleased that Balder was unharmed. He went to Fensalir to Frigg and changed his appearance to that of a woman. Then Frigg asked this woman if she knew what the Aesir were doing at the assembly. She said that everyone was shooting at Balder, and moreover that he was unharmed. Then said Frigg, "Weapons and wood will not hurt Balder. I have received oaths from them all." Then the woman asked, "Have all things sworn oaths not to harm Balder?" Then Frigg replied, "There grows a shoot of a tree to the west of Valhal. It is called mistletoe. It seemed young to me to demand the oath from." Straightway the woman disappeared, and Loki took mistletoe and plucked it and went to the assembly. Hod was standing at the edge of the circle of people, for he was blind. Then Loki said to him, "Why are you not shooting at Balder?" He replied, "Because I cannot see where Balder is, and secondly because I have no weapon." Then said Loki, "Follow other people's example and do Balder honor like other people. I will direct you to where he is standing. Shoot at him this stick." Hod took the mistletoe and shot at Balder at Loki's direction. The missile flew through him, and he fell dead to the ground. And this was the unluckiest deed ever done among gods and men. When Balder had fallen, then all of the Aesir's tongues failed them, as did their hands for lifting him up. And they all looked at each other, and were all of one mind towards the one who had done the deed. But no one could take vengeance. It was a place of such sanctuary. When the Aesir tried to speak, then what happened first was that weeping came out, so that none could tell another in words of his grief. But it was Odin who took this injury the hardest, and that he had the best idea what great deprivation and loss the death of Balder would cause the Aesir. And when the gods came to themselves, then Frigg spoke, and asked who there was among the Aesir who wished to earn all her love and favor, and was willing to ride the road to Hel and try if he could find Balder, and offer Hel a ransom if she would let Balder go back to Asgard. Hermod the Bold, Odin's boy, is the name of the one who undertook this journey. Then Odin's horse Sleipnir was fetched and led forward, and Hermod mounted this horse and galloped away. So the Aesir took Balder's body and carried it to the sea. Ringhorni was the name of Balder's ship. It was the biggest of all ships. This the Aesir planned to launch and perform on it Balder's funeral. But the ship refused to move. So they sent to giant land for a giantess called Hyrrokkin. And when she arrived, riding a wolf and using vipers as reins, she dismounted from her steed, and Odin summoned 4 berserks to look after the mount, and they were unable to hold it without knocking it down. Then Hyrrokkin went to the prow of the boat and pushed it out with the first touch, so that flame flew from the rollers and all lands quaked. Then Thor became angry and grasped his hammer and was about to smash her head until all the gods begged for grace for her. Then Balder's body was carried out onto the ship, and when his wife Nanna, Neb's daughter, saw this, she collapsed with grief and died. She was carried on to the pyre, and it was set fire to. Then Thor stood by and consecrated the pyre with Mjolnir. But a certain dwarf ran in front of his feet. His name was Lit. Thor kicked at him with his foot and thrust him into the fire, and he was burned. This burning was attended by beings of many different kinds. Firstly, to tell of Odin, that with him went Frigg and Valkyries and his ravens, while Freyr drove in a chariot with a boar called Gullinbursti or Slidrugstani. But Heimdall rode a horse called Gulltop, and Freya her cats. There came also a great company of frost giants and mountain giants. Odin laid on the pyre a gold arm ring called Draupnir. It afterwards had the property that every 9th night there dripped from it 8 gold rings of the same weight. Balder's horse was led onto the pyre with all its harness. But there is this to tell of Hermod, that he rode for 9 nights through valleys dark and deep, so that he saw nothing until he came to the river Gjöll and rode on to Gjöll Bridge. It is covered with glowing gold. There is a maiden guarding the bridge called Modgud. She asked him his name and lineage, and said that the other day there had ridden over the bridge 5 battalions of dead men. But the bridge resounds no less under just you, and you do not have the color of dead men. Why are you riding here on the road to hell? He replied, I am to ride to hell to seek Balder, but have you seen anything of Balder on the road to hell? And she said that Balder had ridden there over Gjöll bridge, but downwards and northward lies the road to hell. Then Hermod rode on until he came to Hell's gates. Then he dismounted from the horse and tightened its girth, mounted and spurred it on. The horse jumped so hard and over the gate that it came nowhere near. Then Hermod rode up to the hall and dismounted from his horse, went into the hall, saw sitting there in the seat of honor his brother Balder, and Hermod stayed there the night. In the morning Hermod begged from Hel that Balder might ride home with him, and said what great weeping there was among the Aesir. But Hel said that it must be tested whether Balder was as beloved as people said in the following way. And if all things in the world, alive and dead, weep for him, then he shall go back to the Aesir, but be kept with Hel if any objects or refuses to weep. Then Hermod got up, and Balder went with him out of the hall and took the ring Draupnir and sent it to Odin as a keepsake. And Nanna sent Frigg a linen robe and other gifts too. To Fula a finger ring. Then Hermod rode back on his way and came to Asgard and told all the tidings he had seen and heard. After this the Aesir sent over all the world messengers to request that Balder be wept out of Hel. And all did this, the people and animals and the earth and the stones and trees and every metal, just as you will have seen that these things weep when they come out of frost and into heat. When the envoys were traveling back, having well fulfilled their errand, they found in a certain cave a giantess sitting. She said her name was Thanks. They bade her weep Balder out of Hel. And she said, Thanks will weep dry tears for Balder's burial. No good got I from the old sons either dead or alive. Let Hel hold what she has. It is presumed that this was Loki Lofearson, who has done most evil among the Aesir. Then spoke Angleri. It was quite an achievement of Loki's when he brought it about, first of all, that Balder was killed, and also that he was not redeemed from Hel. But was he punished at all for this? Hai said, He was required for this in such a way that he will not soon forget it. The gods having become as angry with him as one might expect, he ran away and hid in a certain mountain, built a house there with 4 doors so that he could see out of the house in all directions. But in the daytime he often turned himself into the form of a salmon and hid in a place called Ragnarok, waterfall. Then he pondered what sort of device the Aesir would be likely to think up to catch him in the waterfall. And as he sat in the house, he took some linen thread and tied knots in the way in which ever since a net has been. A fire was burning in front of him. Then he noticed that the Aesir were only a short distance away from him, and Odin had seen where he was from Lidskjalf. He immediately jumped up and out into the river, throwing the net down into the fire. And when the Aesir reached the house, then the first to enter was the wisest of all, called Vazir. And when he saw in the fire the shape in the ashes where the net had burned, he realized that it must be a device to catch fish, and told the Aesir. After that they went and made themselves a net just like what they saw in the ashes that Loki had made. And when the net was finished, the Aesir went to the river and threw the net into the waterfall. Thor held one end, and all the Aesir held the other, and they dragged the net. But Loki went along in front and lay down between 2 stones. They dragged the net over him and could tell there was something live there, and went a second time up to the waterfall and threw out the net and weighted it down so heavily that nothing would be able to go underneath. Then Loki went along in front of the net, and when he saw that it was only a short way to the sea, then he leaped up over the top of the net and slipped up into the waterfall. This time the Asers saw where he went. They went back up to the waterfall and divided their party into 2 groups. And Thor waded along the middle of the river, and thus they advanced towards the sea. And when Loki saw there were 2 alternatives, it was mortal danger to rush into the sea, but so it was also to leap again over the net. And this is what he did: leaped as swiftly as he could over the top of the net. Thor grabbed at him and got his hand round him, and he slipped in his hand so that the hand caught hold at the tail. And it is for this reason that the salmon tapers towards the tail. Now Loki was captured without quarter and taken to a certain cave. Then they took 3 stone slabs and set them on edge and knocked a hole in each slab. Then Loki's sons, Vali and Nari or Narfi, were fetched. The Aesir turned Vali into the form of a wolf, and he tore his brother Narfi to pieces. Then the Aesir took his guts and bound Loki with them across the 3 stones, one under his shoulders, one under his loins, the third under the backs of his knees, and these bonds turned to iron. Then Skadi got a poisonous snake and fixed it up over him so that the poison would drip from the snake into his face. But his wife Sigyn stands next to him holding a basin under the drops of poison, and when the basin is full she goes and pours away the poison. But in the meantime the poison drips into his face. Then he jerks away so hard that the whole earth shakes. That is what you call an earthquake. There he will lie in bonds until Ragnarok. Then spoke Angleri. What information is there to be given about Ragnarok? I have not heard tell of this before. Hai said, there are many important things to be told about it. First of all, that a winter will come called Fimbul winter, mighty or mysterious winter. Then snow will drift from all directions. There will then be great frost and keen winds. The sun will do no good. There will be 3 of these winters together and no summer between. But before that, there will come 3 other winters during which there will be great battles throughout the world. Then brothers will kill each other out of greed, and no one will show mercy to father or son in killing or breaking the taboos of kinship. Thus it says in Voluspa. Brothers will fight and kill each other. Cousins will break the bonds of their relationship. It will be harsh for heroes, much depravity, age of axes, age of swords, shields cloven, age of winds, age of wolves, until the world is ruined. Then something will happen that will be thought a most significant event. The wolf will swallow the sun, and people will think this a great disaster. Then the other wolf will catch the moon, and he also will cause much mischief. The stars will disappear from the sky. Then there will take place another event. The whole earth and mountains will shake so much that trees will become uprooted from the earth and the mountains will fall, and all fetters and bonds will snap and break. Then Farron's wolf will get free. Then the ocean will surge up onto the lands because the Midgard serpent will fly into a giant rage and make its way ashore. Then it will also happen that Naglfar will be loosed from its moorings, the ship of that name. It is made of dead people's nails, and it is worth taking care lest anyone die with untrimmed nails, since such a person contributes much material to the ship, Niflgar, which gods and men wish would take a long time to finish. And in this flood, Naglfar will be carried along. There is a giant called Rim who will captain Naglfar. But Farron's wolf will go with mouth agape, and its upper jaw will be against the sky and its lower one against the earth. It would gape wider if there was room. Flames will burn from its eyes and nostrils. The Midgard serpent will spit so much poison that it will bespatter all the sky and sea, and it will be very terrible, and it will be on one side of the wolf. Amid this turmoil the sky will open, and from it will ride the sons of Muspel. Surt will ride in front, and both before and behind him there will be burning fire. His sword will be very fine. Light will shine from it more brightly than from the sun. And when they ride over Bifrost it will break, as was said above. Muspel's lads will advance to the field called Vigrid. Then there will also arrive their Fenris wolf and the Midgard serpent. By then Loki will also have arrived there, and Rim, and with him all the frost giants. But with Loki will be all Hell's people. But Muspel's sons will have their own battle array. It will be very bright. The field, Vigrid, is 100 leagues in each direction. And when these events take place, Heimdall will stand up and blow mightily on Gyllerhorn, and awaken all the gods, and they will hold a parliament together. Then Odin will ride to Mimir's well and consult Mimir on his own and his people's behalf. Then the ash, Yggdrasil, will shake, and nothing will then be unafraid in heaven or on earth. The Aesir will put on their war gear, and so will all the Einherjar, and advance onto the field. Odin will ride in front with golden helmet and fine coat of mail, and his spear called Gungnir. He will make for Farron's wolf, and Thor will advance at his side and be unable to aid him because he will have his hands full fighting the Midgard serpent. Freyr will fight Surt, and there will be a harsh conflict before Freyr falls. The cause of his death will be that he will be without the good sword that he gave Skirnir. Then we'll also have Godfrey the dog Garm, which is bound in front of Nipalheller. This is the most evil creature. He will have a battle with Tyr, and they will each be the death of the other. Thor will be victorious over the Midgard serpent, and will step away from it 9 paces. Then he will fall to the ground dead from the poison which the serpent will spit at him. The wolf will swallow Odin. That will be the cause of his death. And immediately after Vidar will come forward and step with one foot on the lower jaw of the wolf. On this foot he will have a shoe for which the material has been being collected throughout all time. It is the waste pieces that people cut from their shoes at the toe and heel. Therefore, anyone that is concerned to give assistance to the Aesir must throw these pieces away. With one hand he will grasp the wolf's upper jaw and tear apart its mouth, and this will cause the wolf's death. Loki will have a battle with Heimdall, and they will cause each other's death. After that, Surt will fling fire over the earth and burn the whole world. Thus it is related in Voluspa. Loud blows Heimdall, his horn is aloft. Odin speaks with Mim's head. The ash Yggdrasil shakes as it stands. The ancient tree groans, and the giant gets free. What is it with Aesir? What is it with the elves? All giant land resounds. Aesir are in council. Dwarfs groan before rock doorways. Frequenters of rock walls. Know you yet, or what? Rim drives from the east, holding his shield before him. Iermagond writhes in a giant rage. The serpent churns the waves. The eagle will screech with joy. Darkly pale it tears corpses. Naglfar is loosed. A bark sails from the east. Across the sea will come Muspel's troops with Loki at the helm. All that monstrous brood are there with the wolf. In company with them is Byleth's brother. Surt travels from the south with the Styx destroyer Fire. Shines from his sword the son of the gods of the slain. Rock cliffs crash and tall wives are abroad. Heroes tread the road of hell, and heaven splits. Then Lin's second sorrow comes to pass as Odin goes to fight the wolf, and Beli's bright slayer against Surt. There shall fall Frigg's delight. Odin's son goes to fight the wolf. Vidar on his way against the slaughterous beast. With his hand he lets his blade pierce Vedrung's son's heart. So is his father avenged. Goes the great son, Odin, dying, to the serpent who shrinks from no shame. All heroes shall leave the world with Midgard's protector strikes in wrath. The sun will go dark, earth sink in the sea, from heaven vanish bright stars. Steam surges and life's warmer fire, high flame flickers against the very sky. It also says here, there is a field called Vigrid where shall meet in battle Surt and the sweet gods. 100 leagues each way it is. This field is marked out for them. Then spoke Ngleri. What will happen then after heaven and earth and all the world is burned and all the gods and all Enheriar and all mankind are dead? You said previously that everyone shall live in some world or other forever and ever. Then said Third, there will then be many mansions that are good and many that are bad. The best place to be in heaven then will be Gimli, and there will be plenty of good drink for those that take pleasure in it in the hall called Brimmer. That is also in heaven. That is also a good hall which is situated on Nindafjall, built of red gold. It is called Sindri. In these halls shall dwell good and virtuous people. On Nastrands is a large and unpleasant hall, and its doors face north. It is also woven out of snake bodies, like a wattled house, and the snake heads all face inside the house, and spit poison, so that rivers of poison flow along the hall, and wading those rivers are oath-breakers and murderers, as it says here. I know a hall that stands far from the sun on Nastrand. North face the doors. Poison drops flow in through the smoke hall. This hall is woven from snake backs. There shall wade heavy streams men who are perjured and murderers. But it is worst in Vegelmer. There Nidhogg torments the bodies of the dead. Then spoke Engleri, will there be any gods alive then? And will there be any kind of earth or sky? Hai said, the earth will shoot up out of the sea and will then be green and fair. Crops will grow unsown. Vidar and Vali will be alive, the sea and Surt's fire not having harmed them, and they will dwell on Idavall, where Asgard had been previously. And then Thor's sons Modi and Magni will arrive, bringing Mjolnir. After that Balder and Hod will arrive from Hel. Then they will all sit down together and talk, and discuss their mysteries and speak of the things that had happened in former times, of the Midgard serpent and Farron's wolf. Then they will find in the grass the golden playing pieces that had belonged to the Aesir. Thus it is said, Vidar and Vali will dwell in the gods' holy places when Surt's flames goes dark. Modi and Magni shall have Mjolnir when Vingnir fights no more. And in place called Hodmimir's Holt, 2 people will lie hid during Surt's fire called Life and Leifrasir, and their food will be the dews of morning. And from these people there will be descended such a great progeny that all the world will be inhabited, as it says here. Life and Leifrasir, and they shall lie hid in Hodmimir's Holt. Dews of morning they shall have as their food, and from them shall grow mankind. And this also will seem amazing to you, that the son will have begotten a daughter no less fair than she is, and she shall follow the paths of her mother, as it says here. A daughter shall Afrodil bear before Fenrir catches her. She shall ride, when the powers die, the maiden, her mother's road. And now if you know any more questions to ask further into the future, I do not know where you will find the answers, for I have heard no one relate the story of the world any further on in time. And may the knowledge you have gained do you good. Next, Gangleri heard great noises in every direction from him, and he looked out to one side. And when he looked around further, he found he was standing out on open ground, could see no hall and no castle. Then he went off on his way, and came back to his kingdom, and told of the events he had seen and heard about. And from this account, these stories passed from one person to another. But the Aesir sat down to discuss and hold a conference, and went over all these stories that had been told him, and assigned those same names that were mentioned above to the people and places that were there in Sweden, so that when long periods of time had passed, men should not doubt that they were all the same, those Aesir about whom stories were told above, and those who were now given the same names. So someone there was given the name Thor, and this means the ancient Thor of the Aesir, that is, Octu Thor, and to him are attributed the exploits which Thor, Hector, performed in Troy. And it is believed that the Turks told tales about Ulysses, and that they gave him the name Loki, for the Turks were especially hostile to him. We have reached the end of the reading of Snorri Turluson Edda, the Gylfaginning, translated by Anthony Faulks. Before you head out, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for further updates, and till the next time we meet each other somewhere here on my channel, be blessed.